Good evening, everyone. This is the time and place set for the City of Royal Oak Planning Commission regular meeting for March 2022. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll call for a introduction by the commissioners, starting down at my right.
Eric Klooster.
Charlene Douglas, City Commissioner.
Tim Twing, Director of Community Development.
Mike Fournier, Mayor.
Aaron Liao, City Attorney.
Woody Gantina.
All right, and I'm Gary Casada. I'm the chairperson. All right, so the first order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes for the last meeting, which was in February 8th. And I would ask if the commissioners had a chance to look at the meeting minutes. Do they have any comments, questions, or a motion? Oh, Commissioner Douglas.
I'll move approval.
Have a motion to approve the meeting minutes, second by Mayor Fournier. Is there a discussion on this? What is that, an indication? No? Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll call for the vote. We'll start with Mr. Gantina.
Don't need to.
Oh, you don't need it?
Don't need a roll call.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, very good. Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Before we proceed to the public comment on non-agenda items, I guess I would ask if any of the commissioners or the department have any additions to the agenda before we begin. Doesn't look like any. All right, we'll proceed to call for public comment on non-agenda items. If you have an issue you'd like to discuss that is not on our agenda, not one of the items for hearing, we'd invite you to come up and speak to the commission. All right, seeing none, was there somebody?
No.
Okay, I will close that portion of the meeting, and we'll move to new business. First thing on the agenda would be the public hearing on the special land use and site plan SP 220304. This has to do with the 430 to 470 South Main Street parcels. Mr. Twing, can you give us a preview?
I'll give you a brief overview. As you indicated, this property is on South Main Street in downtown Royal Oak. It's proposed to occupy an existing space, an existing building. The proposing operation is for a restaurant with liquor service, alcoholic services. The reason it's in front of you this evening is because two of the spaces that they're expanding into did not previously have approvals for a restaurant with alcoholic beverage services. So technically under the zoning ordinance, it's an expansion of that operation. In the central business district, restaurants with alcoholic beverage services are a special land use. So you do have a copy of the staff special land use report. The space that they're taking over used to be occupied by Mongolian Barbecue, which did have liquor, but the other two did not, which were Noodles and Company and the GameStop facility. It's approximately 11,000 square feet in total. There's 256 indoor chairs in the restaurant is proposed, and there's 42 in an outside sidewalk cafe proposed for 3 locations, as you may see on your plan. One of those sidewalk cafes is on Main Street in a standard fashion with tables, chairs, and railing around it. The other locations, I'm going to split them into 3 because they're separated by different spaces. And they're kind of in the southeast corner of the building at the intersection of 5th and Main Street. Those are a little different than the standard layout in that they have roll-up doors with bar stools that would face an interior bar for service. All of those, because they're in the public right-of-way, would still need City Commission approval of a license agreement, although the City Commission has already blessed the overall plan of operations. The license agreement will provide the city with more details on the layout, the dimensions of those spaces, and engineering will confirm that there's space for those in terms of their encroachment, making sure they're compliant with ADA rules, et cetera. And then it would also have a signed license agreement allowing them to be there seasonally from April to October. And they would also have to have the standard insurance submittal as part of that sidewalk cafe. Let's see. So those are the primary issues that's in front of you. One that I would also just point out for your information and discussion would be in regards to the takeout hallway location. I only pointed out, and there's no ordinance requirement against it, but 5th Street doesn't allow parking, and access is from 5th Street, which may result in people trying to stop and park on 5th Street to get the takeout service. With that, I'll stop, and if there's questions of me, I'll be happy to address them.
Any questions for Mr. Twing before we call for the petitioner to make the presentation? I guess I have a quick one. So the sidewalk cafes have sort of both an operation and a physical aspect to them. So we take this as we have a special land use. That's a consideration, operation, right? But the actual placement, which I'm going to ask some questions about when we get to the site plan, that's a site plan issue, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. As the petitioner here, could the petitioner please come forward and introduce yourself and tell us about your project and why you want special land use?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Kevin Kozak. I'm the Vice President of Development and Construction for Project Barfly, who is a parent company for Hopcat. We are excited to be in front of you today because when we closed this location, we were pretty disappointed, and first thing we wanted to do was get back here when we had an opportunity. So we did present this plan. We think this is a great opportunity for the city as well as Hopcat. The outdoor seating cafes, the one that is in the corner over there on 5th and South Main Street, it's a little bit different than normal patios here in the city, but we've had our architectural and civil team make sure that all of them fall into the parameters of the sidewalk cafe permits. The distancing is there. What we tried to do is, we know that this space has been vacant for a while. We wanted to somehow activate that corner, and we thought this was a really cool idea on how to activate the corner, get a buzz around the city, and make it fun for the residents walking foot traffic.
All right. Tell us about your operation. You heard the comment about the takeout. I guess I'd also like to know about that.
Sure. So we're a full-service restaurant. The restaurant's going to be pretty much the same exact restaurant that was here before. The only difference would be is we're one single story instead of 3. The meals are exactly the same. We do about 75% food sales, about 25% alcohol sales. This will be a full-service restaurant. Like he said, we do have about 250 indoor seats. We're going to have some private dining spaces as well for private events and private parties. We do have a takeout business that we're proposing the site at entry door or out the side of the building on 5th Street. We did that with the plan of having to direct traffic and work that. There is obviously on-street parking in front of our facility, but it's on-street parking, first come, first serve. So it's very hard to manage that through takeout business. So we plan that location there as the easiest way for us to execute the plan. The plan is that we'll have, our staff will monitor that to not allow parking on the street and do the best we can.
Do you have any other locations in which you're doing a takeout business?
Yes,
And
we do. So we have 11 restaurants. 9 of them are Hopcats, and all 11 restaurants are doing takeout business.
Okay, do you have some understanding of what the volume would be for a restaurant this size?
On average, we probably do across the concept somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 a week in sales.
I'm talking about specifically takeout businesses. Is that
That's
what you're
what
talking
I'm saying.
about? Okay, and do we know
Yep.
how many pickups that is?
I do not know that off the top of my head, no.
All right. Have you looked at various alternatives? You said this is the best idea that you had. Did there's also an alley in the back. I don't know what the rules are on that. Is there some way to access that?
We did think through that. It's a very tight alley. So the problem being is either third-party vendors or somebody personally coming to pick up takeout. They pull into the alleyway. There's no way to police traffic going both ways. It's essentially almost a one-way. So it cause major pileups in that back alleyway.
At any of your other locations, do you have people do they bring the food out to people, or does the people have to park their car and come in?
We bring the food out.
Okay, and tell us how you do that. I mean, there must be some communication then, yes?
Yes, that is correct. So it is set up through an app. All of our ordering is done through an app. So we're notified on third-party drivers. We're notified when they get to the facility or close to the facility. We run all the food right out the door. For customers like yourself, if you order takeout, when you order your food, you give us your car, make, color, model. We tell you what time to be there. You show up, the staff can see your car. They walk the food out to your car.
And those people would come and stop on 5th Street?
Or find parking on the road
On
and
Main
walk to the door.
All right. Okay.
There is the public lot on the other side of the railroad tracks, right off of 5th Street next to O'Toole's, which we think that'll get a lot of use from our traffic as well.
All right. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just on this topic, I think maybe you could illustrate with your experience in the industry, especially with your other stores, with or without the takeout area. I mean, people are still going to call ahead and order food to take out, and does that change, in your opinion, where or how people would park in the vicinity, or do you see them just no matter what, as long as you're offering takeout, which every restaurant has to survive, of course, that the location of the actual pickup spot either provides more organization or less organization, or can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So it definitely provides more organization for us because it's a central point. What we hope that people do is either they call ahead for takeout, they actually park their car, come in, and have a beverage while they're sitting there waiting for their takeout, which will be then delivered through the front door or at their stool where they're sitting. The reason that we go to a central takeout area is the volume of food that's coming out of the kitchen to go to the dining room versus to the takeout. It's just a way to separate it. What it does is instead of sitting down and having a 25-minute ticket time, you're staying in our average 10-minute ticket time. It just speeds up the flow of the kitchen to be able to serve better.
Other questions for the petitioner? Commissioner Douglas.
I'm going to continue to follow this topic. I mean, I'm looking at a street view of your Ann Arbor store, which is on kind of a similar street, narrow, adjacent to other, how does this operate here, and what kind of issues have you had? How have you solved this problem? Because it does seem like a problem.
Sure. Well, takeout in general, as you know, with COVID, has gone through the roof.
Right.
It's been a necessity to be able to do it. So there's a lot of things that we can't control. We can't control how the roads are set up. We can't control how parking's set up on the roads. What we can do is try to best mitigate it. Ann Arbor's a great location. They have an alleyway in the back that we're unable to service the same way that this one would be. So we have a separate takeout area in front of the Ann Arbor location. The main entry is to the left when you're looking at the site plan, and then we have a separate takeout area. Again, it does the same thing. It eliminates the pressure so that we're able to control it. What they do there, as you can see, there's on-street parking in front of us, but there's nowhere for them to stop. They can't just stop in the middle of the road, so they find parking spots throughout the city. Meter parking, or there's a parking garage across the street. They pull in, run in, get the food, and then come out.
What's your relationship with the police? How do you coordinate and cooperate with the police department with issues here and elsewhere?
Sure. So our team, I am not on the operations side of things. I'm on the development and construction side. But our team, the area directors, Craig was actually here for our last presentation on the approval of the operation plan. They will actually come and meet with the police department before we open, talk through all of these things, set up a game plan of how they want to operate with us and what we do. Now, I can tell you that we are not a 50-cent shot and pop bar. We don't have $2 beers. We try not to serve that type of clientele. Our people are typically spending about $25, per check. And we have a very good alcohol control program as well that we put in place.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the petitioner? I'll have another one. So I think just in general, just for the record, what you have here is the space, the Noodles and Company space was a restaurant, just didn't have alcohol. This is also the old GameStop space.
That is correct.
Which you're filling up, you're building out for your purposes. And of course, the B&D's was also a restaurant. So what you're doing here is just making a larger restaurant. And again, the reason you're here is because you're serving alcohol in the whole place.
That's correct.
That's the idea. Tell me about how you operate. I think the southeast corner where you have the bar stools on the sidewalk, I'm just a little curious because I can't tell from the picture here. There's a railing around it, and why? That's just a railing to protect the people. Do you have waits service out there, or is everything served from the inside? Tell us how that operates.
Great question. So the railing that is around there, that railing is what is specified by the city for sidewalk cafe permits. So that it's I believe, a 42-inch high railing. It's spaced out exactly per the specifications away from the curb line as well for pedestrian access. You cannot get into that railing unless you come inside through the building. The way that area is set up is that there's 3 windows that are there today. We'll pull those 3 windows out and put garage doors in. They will match the existing storefront, so you'll be able to tell a little bit that they've changed. But they will open up, and then there's actually a bar top that is sitting on the inside of the building. So they open up, and you can't get inside the building from those bar stools. They're completely blocked. The only way in and out of that side patio is from the 2 doors that come in. There's 2 of them for egress purposes. One here on, it would be the, I believe, north side, and then one also right there by the takeout area. Those are for egress purposes for leaving the patio. The gates can only open one way, so you can't access it from the outside. So the only way that you can get seated at the patio is by coming in and talking to the hostess. Very similar to the other patio over here, which is just a standard patio. There'll just be regular doors that walk out to that one. It'll be served the same exact way.
From the AE1-01 plan that we're looking at, it appears that the Main Street seating areas, both the tables and the bar stool areas, are about the same width. Is that just schematic, or do you know how wide that's going to be? I'm wondering why you, if all you're going to have is bar stools where individuals are going to come out and not wait staff, do you need the full permitted width at that southeast corner?
I believe, let me open these up. I believe that's just a schematic error on that plan. That front one is not that size, and the reason why is you see this square that sits out in front of it there, right there? That's actually a large planter box. So we'll be set back closer to our bar stools there. It just must not have got changed through planning. So that actually pushes back and will be more close to the one on 5th Street there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because what we tried to do is keep everything exactly per code, what was approved through the sidewalk cafes.
All right. I would think that I think it's an interesting thing, and indeed you will animate that corner, I'm sure. But I would think that we would want to minimize the restricting of foot traffic there if there was no need to do it. That was my point.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions for the petitioner? All right. Seeing none, I'll say maybe you want to stay put, because when the commissioners start talking, they almost always have another question.
Public hearing.
Oh, public hearing. Sorry. Please have a seat while we call the public hearing. All right. We'll now call for public comment on the site plan. If there are members of the public who want to come up and speak on this issue, you have 3 minutes. And just indicate that you want to come up, introduce yourself, and tell us what you think. There we go, right here.
Good evening. My name is Augusto Amoring. I live above where this location is going to be. First of all, thanks for sending the card. It was very helpful to keep track of what's going on in the city. As you brought up, I'm very concerned about especially all this operation on 5th Street. First of all, the carry-out door is exactly the last thing next to our building entrance. As everybody mentioned, carry-out has become out of control. It's very common that we get home and there are cars parked in front of our garage door. We have to call the police department, someone has to go there and tow the vehicle. Has become really a big hassle. So I think that's a really big problem here. As the petitioner said, that's something we cannot control. So, they might have employees trying to direct traffic in there, but it's very clear that that's almost impossible. So I would really beg the city not to approve that carry-out entrance there. Maybe on Main Street would be better. The other thing is, all these bar seats here, I'm a little confused too, looking at the plan. But I would think that will really increase the noise from all the 70 families living above this place. And I think there's a big precedent there, because when Buffalo Wild Wings opened, the city didn't allow any of the doors to open on 5th Street. They opened only on Main Street. And I think that would be fair to that existing business, but also for us, that the same thing happens here. So I would beg the city not to allow these garage doors on 5th Street as well as the seats here. There are only 9 seats. I don't think that would make a huge impact on their revenue, but it would make a big impact on our lives, because the noise will come up right there. Our windows open forward, so people walking on the street, we can hear everything. So having all those constant noise there would be a really inconvenience for us. And I do beg, please don't allow any speakers on that side of the street. One thing I also am not very clear, and I don't know how much we can establish where the kitchen would be, because it looks like it's really in the middle of it and very connected to our lobby. When Cold Stone was there, our lobby smelled like waffles. I think everyone would agree that waffles smell better than French fries or fried stuff. Only today walking here, just walking there, the smell coming from Buffalo Wild Wings is horrible. Like the entire block is smelling fried stuff. So I think we need to think of a way really to make sure the exhaust system here is working properly. So with that, I do think I appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this issue? All right. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and we'll come now back to the commissioners for discussion and questions for Mr. Twing or the petitioner. And I guess I have one right off the bat for Mr. Twing. So there's a lot of restaurants already on Main Street. There's Buffalo Wild Wings and other restaurants right there. We just heard from a member of the public who said there's already a problem. I just wonder, is there any information you can give us about what the situation is on Main Street, 5th Street, 4th Street currently with takeout with the restaurants we have?
In terms of takeout or the number of restaurants, or?
Well, is there a traffic problem with takeout at the restaurants up and down Main Street, maybe in Washington? I'm just curious because, I mean,
Well, the
wanna
difference
take out
between
myself.
Main and 5th is that Main Street has parking spaces that you can pull your car over into. The parking along 5th is prohibited, and there are none on the north side. You can't park there. The south side is designated as a loading zone only, and I do know that cars park there as well, but it's not metered. Main Street has parking spots that are first come, first served, so you can pull into them. So the biggest difference is that's not allowed along 5th Street. So it's...
All right. All right. Thank you.
May I supplement?
Yes.
Mr. Twing, the police department routinely reviews, participates in plan review. What has been their take on the issues that we might anticipate here on 5th Street?
Well, they don't necessarily do that. Engineering, building, fire are more involved in the review. The police department reviews this when it takes it to the city commission under the plan of operation, and they make their comments there. Given that this isn't in place, I mean, obviously, if people park there illegally, they're going to have an enforcement issue in terms of issuing tickets and things like that. From a planning standpoint, your opportunity is, from a physical design standpoint, to decide this isn't a good location and tell them to change it.
Well, I understand. I'm just looking for some data there, because I understand people would be perhaps tempted if the takeout door is right there. They might say, well, I'm going to park as close as I can, whether it's legal or not. Yes, that would be a temptation. But you have a whole, I just wondered if this is an ongoing problem, because Buffalo Wild Wings is also there, and I assume they have takeout, and I assume people are also tempted to park for them.
Mm-hmm. And I believe they do park in the loading zone along 5th Street.
Mm-hmm.
To what number, I can't tell you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting observation. I mean, the concern of the residents there is the blocking of their actual or impediment or visibility of getting in and out of the building there. And I'm sure from time to time folks park in front of there not knowing that there isn't an entrance into a residential building. I think what's interesting about this is you have other folks that are operating within that vicinity, getting takeout and all of that, and folks don't want to pay for parking. They'll go in there and they'll mix up the place, and right now there's no enforcement. An interesting observation though with this plan is if you actually have one of the restaurants committing to have some sort of enforcement or whatever during those busy nights, it might actually help the situation from the status quo today, meaning that right now people are loading in there for Buffalo Wild Wings, other restaurants, whatever. There's nobody there to tell them, hey, you can't park there. But now on a busy Friday, Saturday night, when it's most likely to happen, you have somebody from the petitioner, Hopcat, out there saying, I don't care if you're coming to BW3s or whatever, you can't park in this area, you have to move on. So I think in an interesting way, this might actually help the status quo. The alternative is, I've worked in the food industry, and when you don't have those efficiencies, you have people waiting for takeout longer than they need to. So what happens is instead of getting in and out in 5 minutes to get their takeout, because it's all in one area, they're trying to seat people and do whatever, it might take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to get your takeout, which I understand the impact on the business, but what it means for traffic is you have more cars pooled waiting to get their food. When you have 5 people in the business versus 2, you're not cycling through those takeout orders as much. So there is a benefit, I think, to our parking system and to these issues by having the efficiency, even though, ironic way, you're kind of bringing people to fit, but at the same time, you have someone there enforcing. So just some things to consider. Maybe my hypothesis is wrong, but just a thought there to put on the table.
All right, other comments? Mr. Cantina.
Well, I guess, excuse me, I have a question with regards to their operational plan. So this commitment to having employees sort of police that parking area for the takeout entrance, is that part of their operational plan, or is that simply just a stated commitment?
I don't know the answer. Mr. Twing, do we know?
I would have to go back and look and see what the plan of operation the police department had. And again, it really doesn't matter as if somebody's parking there getting service, they can ticket it, they can make it an issue. And it might be if the planning commission is fine with the plan, it might be that the curb needs to get painted yellow. It might be that something else needs to occur to clearly identify, don't park here.
Yeah.
I think maybe the part of the question there was, can we make a condition of the special land use that they commit personnel to attend to the area?
If you believe that would mitigate the issue, absolutely.
I have to say, I'm going to make a comment here just thinking about this, prompted by the mayor's comments. I think if you moved the takeout to the Main Street side of the building, people are going to be equally tempted to park on 5th Street. So I don't know that moving the takeout is going to help anything.
Right.
And not having a takeout door or window isn't going to help either, because people are still going to get takeout and they're just going to have to take longer to get it, get the food. So there is a logic to this that is efficient, which you would expect the restaurant operator would try to make themselves as efficient as possible. So that's just a thought. Mr. Klooster.
Yeah, so it's clearly labeled no parking there. I think it's more of an enforcement issue. Because if people park there, they're doing something illegally, and if it turns into an issue, it's an enforcement issue. It's hard to place that onus on the business owner who's operating a business in an urban area. I love the idea of the roll-up doors and the bar tops on the corner at 5th and Main. I have concern over the bar tops on the 5th Avenue side. The plan shows an indication sort of where the street trees are, but it's missing some of the site furniture and some of the lamp posts, and I have a concern over the width of the sidewalk there. If we push out from the building frontage with the fencing that is required to prevent alcohol from leaving the premises, it starts to really narrow down that sidewalk, and if you get pedestrians going in both ways down there, then you're pushing pedestrians out towards the street, and there's no on-street parking to buffer that sidewalk from the pedestrians. So I have some safety concerns with that bar top wrapping around onto the 5th Avenue side. Again, I think it's a great idea of activating the corner. It's just a little tight there on 5th Avenue without on-street parking there to buffer the pedestrian flow. Generally, I think it's a strong plan. I think a lot of our downtown businesses are restaurants, and restaurants generally are relatively successful, especially on the main street. I think the plan is, from a special land use perspective, I think it's really an expansion of an existing alcohol sales, and I don't think there's any significant issue there. From a site plan perspective, I would like to see that 5th Avenue sidewalk cafe eliminated.
May I ask, Mr. Klooster, I want to make sure I understand what you're talking about. Are you talking about the sidewalk seating on Main Street? Or, because there is no sidewalk seating on 5th, and the railing there is just only intended, I think, to keep people from getting into the restaurant from the street.
So on the 5th Avenue side, this is bar top, these are bar stools, this is fence that wraps around. So those bar stools are on the sidewalk.
Yes,
so those window openings are roll-up doors with bar tops, with bar seating.
I see your point.
So that's where my concern is. There's no on-street parking there that typically acts as a great buffer between pedestrians and vehicles. So it's a little too close.
Honestly, I thought you were concerned about the bar stools on Main Street.
No.
Because of that big planter that's there.
No, that I think is navigable. I think we have a history of sidewalk cafes on Main Street that function very well. Pedestrians can go in and out. They can weave around the lamp posts and the street trees, and it's not a huge concern because there's the on-street parking there that acts as a barrier between pedestrian and vehicular flow. Don't have that on 5th Avenue, and that's where it becomes a safety concern for me.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, had a comment.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. The only thing I'd add to that discussion is this little jaunt to 5th Street is really, really small. You know what I mean? Like the traffic from the tracks to a high-speed issue would be minimal, but if you did have someone coming off Main Street, I could see that being an issue. And if you have, maybe a buffer in the street that prevents parking, like, you put some planters or something, or, some paint or something like that helps people keep that buffer like a car would, just something to consider.
I have a question. There was a comment about that the Buffalo Wild Wings was restricted on which windows could be operable roll-up windows. I wasn't aware of that. I might have missed that meeting if it came before us. Is that something we know about?
It's quite possible. I can't say for a fact that was done without, it was built several years ago and I don't recall, but it is possible that was a condition of either the Planning Commission's action or the City Commission's action on their plan of operation for liquor sales.
All right.
So it is possible, but I can't say for sure that.
Okay, I have another question. Is there a ordinance or ADA requirement about the width between a sidewalk seating and any obstructions like trees, fixed seating, planters, garbage, fixed garbage?
Well, as I indicated, and it's in the staff report under the site plan, the sidewalk cafes that are out in the public right-of-way will require City Commission approval. Really, the Planning Commission's jurisdiction ends at property lines. They'll have to go and show that they meet all the standards in terms of a 5-foot clearance from any obstruction. They'll have to show that the railings match the city's policy standards. They will have to provide the insurance to cover that encroachment in the right-of-way. If the Planning Commission wants to recommend they not be done or that they be modified in some way, that would be fine, but the end result of the right-of-way would be a City Commission decision.
I was more thinking along the lines that the standard conditions are you have to meet all the ordinances, and if there's an ordinance that assures that there's adequate passage for pedestrians, well, that they would have to meet that.
Yes.
All right. Other comments, questions for Mr. Twing, or questions for the petitioner? I have a question for the petitioner, if he doesn't mind. There was also a question about speakers. I do understand that some restaurants have speakers outside. What are your operational plans?
So our operational plan does call for some exterior speakers, but we are fully 100% committed to keeping in line with all local sound ordinances.
All right, and again, there's an ordinance that applies to that.
That is correct.
All right, very good. That was my one question for you to make you come back up here. But any other questions for the petitioner as long as we have them? Further discussion about the requested special land use or a motion or questions from Mr. Twing? Sorry, Commissioner Douglas.
Yeah, I think the issues that we have here are part of the site plan, and we'll have an opportunity perhaps to discuss those further when we get to that. In terms of the general concept of the special land use, I find that this development meets the seven items that are the basis of determination to approve a special land use, and I will move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is it your second?
He was second.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Klooster, second. I didn't see him. You guys are too quick for me. Okay. All right. So we have a motion by Commissioner Douglas, seconded by Mr. Klooster, to approve the special land use for the reason it meets the 7 factors of consideration in the ordinance. Is there discussion on this matter? And remember, this is just the special land use. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll just add, Hopcat was a good actor here in the city, a beloved restaurant for a lot of people. It's proven the type of food service and beverage service that you provide. You do this in at least 9 other locations, expanding the footprint from a previous liquor selling establishment and making it bigger under your concept. Certainly isn't going to be detrimental and probably be welcomed by a lot of people so they can patronize your business. So I don't see for the use and expansion of this footprint to include alcohol sales, I don't see that as being an impediment at all. Then we'll talk about the site plan.
All right. Quick question for me, for the petitioner. What are your hours of operation when you got the
Yep,
restaurant open?
so we are going to be open on Sunday from 11 to 11, Monday through Thursday, 11 to 11, and Friday and Saturday, 11 to 12.
Okay, so you close at midnight.
That is correct.
Okay. Any further discussion before we call for the vote on the special land use? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote, and I'm going to start again with Mr. Gantina.
Just a voice
yes.
vote. You just need a voice vote.
Okay, that's
The
what we're
roll
doing.
call's gone away because we're not remote.
Okay,
You
Old
can
habits
just do
die
it.
hard.
very good. Well, I got to make sure I hear everybody correctly then. Okay, we'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all against say nay. I don't hear any nays. So apparently it passes unanimously to approve the special land use. Don't go away. We're going to talk about the site plan now. Is there anything further, Mr. Twing, you want to add about the site plan?
No, it's really standard contingencies other than the requirement that sidewalk cafes get city commission approval. And I would point out that all signage would have to comply with the sign ordinance.
And lighting.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there further questions for the petitioner, Mr. Commissioner Douglas?
Yes, two questions. One is, Mr. Twing, can we require the applicant to pay for some signage on along the Fifth Street side more ample than what is there now? No parking, standing, stopping, don't even think of stopping here?
I would suggest that maybe you refer that to the traffic committee and decide whether or not, and have it come through that process, and what would be the best method of identifying that you can't park there.
Yeah.
Whether that's painting or some more signage. And since traffic control signs have a specific requirement and placement, I think it would be best to go through that.
I'll pass that buck, thanks.
Okay.
And
But you
my-
could add that to this, that they go to the traffic committee.
Oh, okay. And my other observation would be that they do have a plan of operation with the city, and if things got out of hand on Fifth Street, I think we as a city commission would have the capacity to bring them back in front of us and tell them to clean up their act. So while I do anticipate there are going to be issues there, I think we have tools available to us to solve those.
All right. Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, I guess I'm going to call for the vote on the site plan to approve the site plan with the contingencies. Wait, we don't have a motion
Need a
yet. I'm sorry. Getting confused today. Is there a motion or further discussion? I'm not trying to cut off discussion.
I'll move for the site plan.
Motion by Mr. Fournier to approve the site plan. Is there a second?
Is that with the contingency?
Yeah, with the contingency to send the parking issue to traffic, just to see if they can come up with a remedy to mitigate, not just for this business, but for the area, for all the residents in that area.
Can I get a clarification? How does that work? Who sends it to the, is it the petitioner has to apply, or does the city
That's a
commission?
great question for Mr. Twing.
We'll coordinate it through the engineering.
Yeah. Sometimes the engineering, direct staff to put it on the agenda for engineering, through engineering, I guess. They can put stuff on there
They
too.
work for me, so I'll
Okay, so
I know a guy.
So I just want to make sure, because the motion would include the contingency that the issue of food pickup traffic on Fifth Street be referred to the traffic committee for consideration
To prevent illegal parking, yeah.
prior to final approval of the site plan.
No. As a condition of the site plan, to send it to traffic to come up with the recommendation to address illegal parking in that particular street.
That's
So-
correct. They'll just be responsible for whatever actions
Okay.
come out of the traffic
Yeah.
committee and city commission. So if the traffic committee and the city commission say paint the curb yellow and put up 2 more signs,
Put some
That'll be
stanchions,
just theirs.
whatever, I mean, bollards, whatever they decide is the best remedy, engineering-wise, then that would be, and whatever the petitioner has to be involved in that and support, then they would be obligated to that.
Okay, so the contingency is to send the issue as described to the traffic committee.
Yeah. Instead of trying to figure it out here, we may do it wrong, and they will definitely do it much better than us.
Okay, that's a 7th condition. Okay. Was there a second?
I'll support.
Mr. Gantina, second. So we have a motion by Mr. Mayor Fournier, with 7 contingencies and seconded by Mr. Gontina. Is there further discussion on this matter? Mr. Klooster.
Yes, so the sidewalk cafes, as far as I understand, are for this part of the City Commission's review. I would like to voice to the City Commission that I do not recommend sidewalk cafes on Fifth Avenue.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I actually appreciate Mr. Klooster's point. I'm going to walk it, and we renew those every year. So even if there is an issue, we get it half right, half wrong, we can fix it. I don't think it disrupts the operation. It would just be that those, that fencing would come down, and they wouldn't be able to seat on the outside of the thing. They would have to only from inside facing out. So it doesn't like make or break the project. The event in the future we decide to go down a different route. I'm going to look at that a little further, but I don't want to hinder the opportunity, take it off the table until we explore it a little bit further.
Yep. All right, Mr. Contina.
I just, now that we're at the site plan, I just want to make one quick comment about the takeout entrance and the concerns that have been voiced. I do think it's a little unfair to place the responsibility on the applicant of how their patrons may arrive to pick up their takeout. Certainly it's, maybe not the most ideal situation with there not being any parking at Fifth Avenue, but at the same token, I don't think it should be the applicant's responsibility to have to police how patrons park their vehicles when they're coming to pick up the takeout. They could very well be walking to pick up their takeout as well. The fact that they have recognized this and have a plan to mitigate it and are at least stated that they're committed to policing that so that it doesn't become a problem, I think satisfies that issue for me, and otherwise I don't really see any issues with the site plan.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions on the site plan for this petitioner? Okay, seeing none, we're going to try the voice vote again. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed, say nay. All right. Hearing none, I believe you have unanimous approval of the site plan with the 7 contingencies as stated on the record. Good luck. Thank you. All right. The next order of business is a public hearing on the special land use and then the site plan on SP 2203-03. This is the Best Life Microbusiness at 32767 Woodward Avenue. Mr. Twing, can you give us a preview?
Again, this is an existing building, so there is no expansion or new construction other than the renovation of the existing building. It's approximately 4,000 square feet in area. The property also has 2 other tenant spaces located in it that are also part of your site plan packet in terms of review. Those 2 spaces are approximately 2,400 square feet. It's an existing carry-out restaurant with a Subway and a fitness facility. The property also has what's termed a residential accessory parking lot to the west of the alley. That parking lot has some 23 parking spaces in it. There's also 5 parking spaces to the rear of the building for a total of 28 on site that would count towards their parking requirement. The petitioner is proposing to open a marijuana microbusiness as defined in the licensing ordinance. Those are a special land use in the general business zoning district, which this site is located in. The building is located in along Woodward. As part of that process, the review committee, city manager's office did select this operator as one of those that potentially could receive that license slot, and that allowed the petitioner to present their plans to the Planning Commission for its review under the special land use provisions as well as the site plan provisions. The zoning ordinance leaves the final decision up to the City Commission, so your recommendation this evening after the public hearing would be forwarded to the City Commission for their consideration. As I indicated, there's some 28 parking spots associated with the property. Again, those do not count the ones in the Woodward right-of-way. They have to be off-street under the ordinance. The ones in the right-of-way are public spots. They do comply with the minimum standards in the zoning ordinance for the proposed facility, as well as the two existing in the carry-out restaurant and the fitness center. So there's not a parking deficiency or shortage based on the zoning ordinance. They did provide you with a plan that has some landscaping proposed on the site. Basically, some additional landscaping along Samoset, some landscaping in the southwest corner of the residential accessory parking lot. One of your items to consider tonight is whether or not that is sufficient in your review under the landscape plan. In terms of green infrastructure, they are proposing simply to have rain barrels to collect rainwater, but given the existing configuration, that's about all they're proposing under the green infrastructure item. The only deviation from the zoning ordinance in terms of plan review is in regards to some landscaping requirements for the parking lot, given the size and the number that's in there. That is up to your discretion / the City Commission's discretion. When we get to the site plan, I can elaborate on the staff's recommendation to add and change some of the landscape provisions. But I'll wait till we do the site plan review to touch on those items.
All right, thank you. Just a quick question, because this is a little bit different, I think, in some ways than some of our other special land use. The green infrastructure is part of the special land use consideration, not necessarily the site plan, if I understand correctly. So talking about the green infrastructure is something that relates to whether or not they're entitled to special land use from us.
Well, you can talk about it in either or. Simply, there's not a zoning ordinance requirement for green infrastructure.
Right, I think
Could
this
make
is
a
in the
condition,
marijuana special provision.
Right. Yes, and so you could address it under the site plan if you wanted to as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions for Mr. Twing? All right, hearing none. Is the petitioner here? The petitioner would please come up to the podium, introduce yourself, and tell us about your project.
Yes, my name is Jason Wilson from the Wilson Law Group, and I'm counsel for Best Life, who was selected by the city as one of the best suited applicants for a micro-business license in the city of Royal Oak. First, I would like to thank the Planning Commission, the City Commission, and the Mayor for allowing Best Life to make this presentation. And we would like to locate this opportunity at 32767 Woodward Avenue, which is in the general business zone. Our proposed location has been carefully sought out, and it has no issues with compliance with the zoning ordinance or the master plan. As some are aware, with a micro business, it allows the company to cultivate up to 150 plants. And it can also process, package, and sell on site to adults over 21 years of age. To make sure of this, Best Life has procured the state-of-the-art software in order to verify and validate the state IDs or driver's license so that only adults can enter into the showroom on Best Life's premises there. In addition, Best Life will have a security guard there to provide securing for the goods to be sold and also assist in the customer flow. Best Life will be harmonious and stay in accordance with the objectives of the master plan, and the facility will be upgraded in the building aesthetics, the landscape appearance, and stormwater detention as well. Our proposed building will be designed, constructed, and operated as to not change the essential character of the area that it's located in. The project design of the exterior will feature an upgrade to beautify the appearance of the building that has been vacant for years. Best Life's operations will not be hazardous or disturbing to the existing community uses. Best Life has significant on-site parking for employees and customers, which will prevent any person from parking in unattended areas there. Best Life will add multiple landscape features to its immediate surroundings, including the parking lot, alongside the back of the building and the adjacent street there. The roof will also be receiving screenings to prevent any exposure from the HVAC rooftop units. Any damaged masonry on the building will be repaired. Any peeled painting will be replaced and repainted. Best Life will also incorporate the newest odor control measures to prevent any disturbance in any public area there. Best Life would not create any excessive public cost and will not be detrimental to the welfare of the city. There's no need for any additional services, so the city will not, it translates to the city not having any public costs there. Best Life Company was formed by a long-term resident, a Royal Oak resident, Michael Kessler, who operates American Modern Construction Company that's also located in Royal Oak. American Modern and Michael Kessler has been in the cannabis industry since about 2015 as a general contractor and has built out a number of state-of-the-art retail and cultivation locations across the state of Michigan. Some of the locations included multi-state brands such as Viola, Uncle Jay's Joints, Yuma Way Dispensary, and Quartzsite Gardens dispensaries. Best Life has already received its pre-qualification from the state of Michigan, and with the recommendation of this commission and the approval of the city commission, we believe that Best Life will be an excellent addition to the business and the residents of Royal Oak. I'm now going to introduce Best Life's president and founder, Michael Kessler, to kind of go through the site plan.
Good evening. My name is Michael Kessler. I live at 3726 North Connecticut, Royal Oak. I've been living in Royal Oak since 2018, and I've enjoyed the living here and watching the city continue to thrive. When I found out that Royal Oak had adopted the marijuana ordinance, I was excited and hopeful to be chosen to open another local business in my new hometown here in Royal Oak. As stated, the proposed location of Best Life is at 32767 Woodward Avenue, which is shown above on the map. There we go. If we go to the next slide, please. There we go. So our location is just south of 14 Mile Road and is zoned general business. The actual building is surrounded by the general business of Creo Studios to its north, Subway to its south, and then we have Woodward Avenue to the east and our parking lot to the west. As you can see, the parking lot is adjacent to residential homes, as does almost all businesses on Woodward. We acknowledge this, as Best Life will be cautious as to not disturb or cause any negative impact on our neighbors. We go over our preventative measures detailing how we will ensure this statement in a couple minutes. With the help of Daniel Biber Architectural Plans, who unfortunately was unable to be here, I personally will begin to showcase the Best Life facility. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a site plan. Showcases new landscaping, sufficient parking, and stormwater detention systems. There will be a new landscape island installed in the back parking lot located in the west corner. This area will receive a new 3-inch diameter oak tree and be full of ground cover to help play as a role as a rain garden. Along Samoset Street, we'll be planting multiple oak trees as well as multiple boxwood shrubs. 2 oak trees will be planted between the curb and the sidewalk, and one will be between the sidewalk and parking area. There's an existing narrow garden bed that will receive new ground cover and shrubs, and that is alongside the rear of the building. And per recent city requirement, we will also be installing a landscape island within the parking lot just west of the alley. This island will contain 2 crabapple and 1 dogwood tree and mulch as its ground cover. I believe this was mentioned before, and this was a recent requirement sent over to us prior to you guys receiving these plans. The city requires a total of 10 off-street parking spaces for Best Life and an additional 11 for 2 other businesses for a grand total of 21 within the shared parking area. We will have 27 available off-street parking spaces provided. There's additional parallel parking located in front of the building that is not included in this calculation. We have multiple stormwater retention solutions presented on the site plan with our increased area of landscaping that will provide several permeable areas for rainwater to be absorbed. We will also install permeable pavers for the new dumpster enclosure located in the south corner of the parking lot. Our major stormwater retention solution will be provided from our rainwater detention barrels, which will be able to collect over 1,000 gallons of rainwater from the roof of the building. The stored water will be ran through a reverse osmosis filtration system, which will then be available to water our plants, limiting our impact on the city's stormwater system and limiting our daily water usage. The next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide here shows the dumpster floor detail with the permeable pavers and how that's going to be able to absorb rainwater there. And then also that's our proposed stormwater retention tanks. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's the front elevation plan of the building. This is where the customers will enter the building. Our business sign will be centered above the front entrance and will only be 50 square feet. There are several light fixtures in the soffit providing adequate lighting. The 2 north windows located where one of our grow rooms are, these windows will be replaced with spandrel glass to ensure no visibility into that area of the building. The 2 south windows will remain standard storefront glass and be within the waiting room area. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's our rear elevation plan. This entrance will only be used for our employees. As mentioned earlier, we will be installing a narrow garden bed next to the building with small shrubbery. We will be installing a new exterior wall pack light to go with the existing 2 wall pack lights. We will be installing new steel bollards to protect our utility meters. We will also be installing 2 new rooftop screens to prevent the ability to see the existing and new rooftop units. The block will be scraped and repainted to increase appearance. Next slide, please. Thank you. This here is our roof plan. It's showing the 2 existing rooftop units identified as RTU 1 and 2. We'll be installing 4 additional small split systems with a maximum height of 30 inches. The front of the building has an existing parapet wall that blocks the view of all rooftop units, and as mentioned before, the screen walls will be installed to block the rear view. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's our floor plan. So customers will enter through the front doors located at the bottom of the plan there. This is where they'll present identification to the receptionist. Customers will wait in the reception area until escorted into the retail area. With our limited amount of products, our retail area is quite small and will accompany 3 customers at a time. After customers have completed their purchase, they will then be escorted back out through the front doors. The rest of the building is considered growing and processing. Plants will start in the vegetative room and then moved into one of 3 flower rooms. Harvested plants will be hung up in the drying room to dry and cure out. This product will then be trimmed, processed, packaged, and securely stored in the room next to the retail. Next slide, please. On the left is an image of a can filter installed at one of our job sites and an air purifier on the right. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here's the placements of our carbon filters with blower fans identified in green. These filters are called air scrubbers as they remove cannabis odors out of the air. As labeled, there will be 7 of these throughout the building to eliminate the possibility of odor disturbance to our customers and to our neighbors. We will also be installing 2 air purifiers labeled in blue near the entry points of the building to help with minimizing odor, bacteria, and funguses in the air. Every employee upon hire and every year of continued employment, employees will receive training on the importance of odor control. Can filters will be replaced and routinely checked to ensure they are performing properly. This does conclude my presentation of Best Life, and I would like to thank you all for your time and consideration.
All right, don't go away. We might have questions.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody have questions for the petitioner? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple questions in 2 areas. One is going to be with green infrastructure, and the other one's going to be with cap capacity, with the number of plants you're going to have as indicative of what traffic patterns might be or customer traffic patterns might be. The first, with green infrastructure, you said you only have rain barrels, so I'll touch on that first. How many rain barrels do you plan to have?
They'd be 4 250-gallon tanks.
4 250 gallons. Okay, so we're talking in a storm event, maybe taken away if they were empty, 1/4 inch of rain or less. Okay, which is meaningful. And you're making improvements to the parking lot as well. You mentioned that weren't necessarily included. Are you resurfacing the parking lot, or are you just kind of rehabbing it using the existing condition, or are you completely doing away with it and re-asphalting it?
Currently, right now, the parking lot's in pretty good condition.
Okay.
As far as depending on positioning of the new landscape island that was requested by the city, that may change some of the parking a little bit, where, if anything, we'd probably just reseal it and restripe it.
Okay. Because my preference would be permeable pavers or permeable asphalt or cement back there.
Okay.
It's an opportunity to, put more into the ground. Retention's fine. I mean, it helps manage basement backups, but environmentally, permeable pavement is much better. So I just kind of wanted to gauge what the opportunity for that might be, either now or in the future.
Okay.
And then, there'll probably be, because this is Woodward, we always have adjoining, anytime a new business comes in, there's always questions about traffic. This one's unique. This is a micro operation, which means you're at a max of 150 plants. I'm not an expert by any means. I don't know what that means in terms of yield, and do these plants, you grow them every 6 months, or, on a theoretical basis, like what is your maximum amount of ounces, and how does that convert into your maximum amount of customers you could serve as a micro establishment?
It is a little bit difficult to give you an exact number on that, but what we'd be looking at doing is harvesting 50 plants around once a month.
Okay.
With that, you're probably looking at a yield of, I would say, near 20 pounds. Times that by 16 ounces. That would be your number. Can't do that off the top of my head, unfortunately. With that, you would have to understand that that would be drawn out through an entire month of serving customers. If you take our business and compare it to a retail dispensary or provisioning center, we are nowhere close to what the yield would be.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing 20 times 20 pounds, sorry guys, I'm doing my math. You got the finance guy up here. Equals, let's see, 20 times 16 divided by 2. Would you say is average? I mean, 2 ounces is the average purchase?
Yeah, I believe there is a state.
It's 2.5 ounces, I think, is the max you can carry on you, but maybe not everyone buys it. So you're talking roughly a month, if you were to go through all that inventory, 160 potential purchases if the average purchase was 2 ounces divided by, if you're open 5 days a week, 8 customers a day. Does that sound right?
Like I said, micro business is not anywhere near what people are referred to or common with provisioning center.
Yeah, and I can do some of the math in my head, but when I got to that number of 8, I just had to double check and click it in here because that seems okay. I mean, that's your business, but I just wanted to. Is that an appropriate realm when we start thinking about the number of patrons a day? 8 to 10 patrons a day, 8 to 15, under 20. I mean, is that the range we're looking at?
Yeah, I would say it is a little bit odd for somebody to come in and purchase 2 ounces in one purchase.
Okay.
I would say you're probably looking a little bit closer to maybe an ounce. I mean, everybody, it varies completely with users.
But you could have 2 people in a car, so okay, we're not talking 1,000 people, and we're not talking 1 person. Okay.
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to bring attention is that a provisioning center or retail operation, they have several different types of products. They will have what's considered flower, which is just the pure bud that most people are familiar with cannabis. They have different types of concentrates. They have different types of vapes. They have all types of edibles. You name it, they keep coming out with new stuff here and there. What we plan on doing is just solely flower. That's being our main business. And then we're also planning on doing a product that is called live rosin. And all that is basically you take the bud of the plant, heat it, compress it, and it is a concentrate of that. Once again, like I said, we will not have any edibles or vapes within the facility, which will deter several consumers in the area.
Okay. And then I appreciate answering those questions. Just going back, any thoughts on the parking lot? Like any perspectives you can share with us on, from a green infrastructure point of view?
From my point of view, I was just looking at the different types of landscaping that we were going to bring in to increase the permeable areas of that area. And then as far as the roof, I was hoping that with our retention tanks, that would be helping out just from the roof standpoint. And then the permeable pavers with the dumpster enclosure. I mean, I'm standing before you to say that that's what I am projecting to do. If the board or city commissioner sees something that needs to be required to do, then I'd be willing to work with you guys on that.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for my long line of questioning.
Mr. Klooster.
So during your presentation, you mentioned a comment from city staff regarding a landscape island in the parking lot. And it sounded like you committed to doing that. Obviously, it was after plans were submitted, so we're not seeing that design, but you've committed to doing the landscape island inside the parking lot?
Yep. The easiest location for it to be without intruding on the parking lot would be right where that arrow was, putting a landscape island there. And then if worst case scenario, we would probably have to move the handicap spot west one position, and then it would continue right along the alleyway, basically.
Okay. And according to staff reports, it appears that you are currently overparked. You require 21 and currently have 27, or you're proposing 27. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My recommendation for that, to address the green infrastructure as part of that landscape island, is to work with the city engineering department, and instead of a curbed island, consider it as a pre-treatment and storage landscape island. It reduces your pervious or impervious area in your parking lot, and can also be a stormwater feature, and if it's landscaped well, can also be a beautiful aesthetic feature.
Yes,
so
I totally agree.
Recommendation for that landscape area.
All right, thank you. I'd just like a clarification, if you don't mind, Mr. Twing. Your recommendation, the staff's recommendation, if I understood it when I looked at the site plan, was the sort of the 2 triangle areas right on the alleyway to the east of the handicap, and there's an unusable space there. If you look on mine, I was thinking you were talking these two spaces here.
That's correct. And we can get into the detail when we get to the site plan if you'd like. But
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
you're correct
understood what
in
you
that.
were talking about, and then I'll come back to it, because I also don't understand what Mr. Klooster just said. He'll have to explain it to me. So, all right, I have a couple of questions for the petitioner, though. So this is there's security issues in these sorts of businesses, and I think I heard you say that the customers, I mean, there's a few spaces in the front, but your main parking is in the back on the west side. They're going to park on the west side, but they can't come in the west side. They're going to have to walk around to the front. Is that what I understand?
Yes, sir. For the people that would be coming into the building, yes.
Okay. And if I understand correctly, I don't know if Mr. Klooster mentioned this. So with your commitment to put either the curbed islands in that Mr. Twing was suggesting, or the department was suggesting, or whatever Mr. Klooster was talking about, there's an opportunity to add more trees. So at that point, you would be at or above the number of recommended trees. Because our report says you didn't meet the recommendation, but it sounds like you do now.
Yes, that's why I included the 2 dogwood and one other ornamental tree.
Crabapple there.
Yeah.
Okay, and I just for the record here, just to understand, a micro business has 3 aspects of it. You grow, you process, and you dispense, right? And you do it all within your. You don't bring in other businesses' product. It's only your own product.
Correct.
And the processing part of it, that's why I'm a little fuzzy on. Is the processing part to create this live rosin or concentrate or edible? What is the processing part, just so we have it on the record?
Yeah, so processing would be any of the above that you mentioned there. Thing with a lot of concentrates is that they'll use a solvent, such as like a butane. If you go down that route, you would need an explosion like chamber, basically. Obviously, we don't have enough space for anything like that. We don't plan on doing anything like that in the future. A lot of people are consumers enjoy the live rosin because it is solventless. It gets you away from any type of harmful chemicals.
Okay, so is the live rosin process, does that count as, just so I know, does that count as processing or not?
Yes.
It does. Okay,
Yep.
so you're doing limited processing just for practical purposes. You don't have the space.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. One other question. I went out there. I noticed that there's the parking lot does have some damage to the asphalt right in front of the dumpster. I wondered if you're going to add another dumpster there. You need 2 dumpsters. Why do you need the second dumpster?
So one of them is just for normal waste, and then the other dumpster when you have excess cannabis or plant stalks, leaves, anything like that. What you have to do is you can't just put it in a bag and throw it outside. Basically what you have to do is you have to mix it with a compost, whether that's paper, landscape grass. There's a whole list as far as through the state of Michigan on what you need to do, and basically what you're doing is you're making that waste unusable for anybody to perhaps get into that dumpster, which that dumpster has to legally be locked as well.
Okay, so you'll have the 2 dumpsters and 2 different dumpster enclosures, and one of them, because one's new, is you'll put the permeable pavers in there. I guess the question I had about the damage there is, it looks to me like if you have that area is going to have to be fixed at some point, and it might be an opportunity to make the other dumpster enclosure permeable as well, because I think you're going to have to do some work there.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we could do as far as to make them both matching, looking nice, and bring it out as far as we need to. I do recall where you're talking. It is a little bit in front of that other dumpster.
I don't know how heavy the trucks are that come in, but asphalt gets gouged.
Oh yeah, every year. Yeah.
So, all right. Any other questions for the petitioner, Mr. Gantina?
So these guys stole all my thunder with the green infrastructure questions, but they were good answers. I do have some questions on the parking lot. With the traffic island that we're not able to see, do you anticipate losing any parking spaces by having to install that at all?
As far as not being able to really work over this with the board and seeing exactly what size they wanted, it's hard for me to say, but as indicated, I would believe that we would only lose maximum one parking spot, and that would just be because of the handicap parking having to be moved west one spot.
Okay. That was sort of my concern. I want to make sure that we weren't going to end up in a parking deficiency by having to comply with that island.
No.
So then the other question is with the, I believe that there are new greenscape areas that you're installing in the parking lot. Am I to understand that it's currently a paved area that you're actually installing these new green space areas in?
Yes, both of the landscape areas within the parking lot are currently just solid asphalt.
Okay.
Yep.
And then lastly, I believe I heard you correctly in that your reception area you said was rather small. I believe you mentioned that has room for 3 customers at a time?
No, so by legal law of the state of Michigan, your customers into a retail office, you have to have the same amount of what they call bud tenders, basically my employees that would be within the building. Just with the size of that space, I plan on having 3 of my employees, which would be able to help out 3 customers inside the retail. The waiting area is actually pretty large compared to the size of the building, and that would be where waiting customers would sit, and then once one comes in, one comes out.
Gotcha. Okay, so I misunderstood. My concern was if there was an excess of customers in that waiting area, what would the plan be in terms of overflow? But I misunderstood the comment earlier.
Yeah, it is a pretty large space as far as having couches along like the window side there to make it comfortable for the customers to wait.
Well, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for the petitioner at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll ask the petitioner to have a seat and we'll call for public comment. This is the public comment on the site plan, or not site plan, pardon me, special land use for this petitioner. If there are people who would like to speak on this issue, please indicate and then come up, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes. There anybody over here? We have right there. Yes, come on up.
Good evening. I almost didn't come this time, but I'm glad I came. Hi, guys. My name is Patsy Reggio, and okay, I've lived here. My father came home from serving with George Patton in the war, and we raised 5 kids on North Kenwood. So I've lived here since 1944. Excuse me. First of all, I want to give a few facts. Did you know Carolyn Clifford on Channel 7 announced a week ago on the news that Michigan has more people employed by marijuana businesses than any other state in our beautiful United States of America? That's a fact. And she shook her head and she said, money, money, money. Okay. Is Mr. Kessler, I don't know if he can answer this, does he have interest in the other 2 businesses that they want to have in Royal Oak?
This is your time to make your presentation. So.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying they're leaving the human factor out of it. That young lady came from high school, and she spoke up about you can go into a business at 21, buy it, and you can go give it to a high school kid. I also mentioned the fact that the young man that killed those 4 children at Oxford High, the parents were growing marijuana. The book that I would suggest everybody reads is Tell Your Children About Marijuana by Alex Berenson. I perused the book. I don't know how people can sleep at night with selling this stuff. We have our beautiful park in Royal Oak now for children, and all this other stuff is going around. It's very sad. The human element is not brought into this too much. It's all about the building and the trees. Does the water, I'm not a environmental person as far as, will the water really affect the water in people's homes in the area? They showed the other business they were going to go, oh, okay, I'm just going to go now, but I'm so sad. I really am. I feel bad for the children. I feel bad for the parents that are going to have to be dealing with this when kids get this illegally from another person. It's like buying alcohol. 21 go in, go out and give it to a 16-year-old. So I know you guys are doing such a great job, and I'm sorry the world is like this today, that you have to deal with this stuff to have maybe a stop sign or something like that. But I just had to say something. So thank you for listening.
Right,
have a
thank
good
you.
day. Have a good evening.
You too. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Mary Jane WROK, and I live on Buckingham, which is 1 block north of Samoset. And I know recently the city updated Sullivan Park, and it's been wonderful for the neighborhood. Families congregate there. It's been wonderful to see families gathering, having movie nights, having birthday parties. And I just hope that this new business that wants to move in will not affect the neighborhood and the wonderful place that that area has turned into for families and for their neighbors. I do have a question for Mr. Kessler. What happens if there is a negative impact on the neighborhood? What is going to be done if there is one? And then you talk about parking. If there's a high influx of people, will the side streets be inundated with parking? Other people parking there. So I don't know where the employees are going to park. I just want to make sure the neighborhood's not going to just have an influx of people and change the whole neighborhood, because it's a wonderful neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Mike Bruno. I live at 4408 Samoset. I don't have a problem with the type of business. I do think that it might be difficult there. You don't see the other businesses in this floor plan. Across Samoset, there's a gym, and those people typically park on the street because next to the gym, there's another gym and a dog grooming that my dog goes to. And as you heard another resident of the neighborhood talk about, there's a park on the other side of the street. So it's a fairly busy street. Both Samoset and Buckingham, they are cross-throughs for Woodward to Greenfield, so we have a lot of traffic. Last year, Greenfield was closed for the summer, so it was actually kind of nice. We didn't have all that cross-traffic coming through. I know how Ferndale is laid out with the dispensaries. I understand the difference between this business and a dispensary. At the same point, how will they manage the clientele, the amount of business they do? So they only have so much product, but they obviously are a business and want to make more. And you have lineups on Hilton trying to get into Green Buddha to live. And luckily on that side, it's more industrial, so the dispensaries can control traffic. On the other side of Hilton is less so, but that's not where those businesses are. So I guess my concern is we already experience a lot of traffic in that subdivision, and I don't really know what to expect with this, and that is, I guess, my concern. I will say that the parking lot in back is small. It needs to be redone. It's cracking. We walk our dog through it all the time. There's definitely, it's shared. Subway's lunch rush is there. There's a nail salon. There's a donut shop. There's a lot going on there, and I feel like there's no other micro marijuana businesses in that vicinity There's none in Birmingham, Beverly Hills. That's that area that three municipalities meet there. So those residents are going to come too, if they can, because people are interested in buying that product. I understand like the lucrative aspect of it. So I guess overall I'm concerned with the traffic flow to my neighborhood, which I like. Thanks.
Thank you. Over here.
Hello, my name is Stephen Raskin, and I live at 4330 Samoset. 2 main points. The park, that's been a great new addition, and with the new families and whatnot walking around, I just don't think it's the best idea. And then secondly, I'm a medical marijuana patient myself, and I've been one since 2010. And there are so many dispensaries itself, from Ferndale all the way down to southwest to southeast Michigan. And the market itself is so saturated. So I question, is this the right time for this dispensary right now here? Especially based on the industry itself, like what's going on in the industry. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Over here.
I'll be a little slow. I will. I'll get there.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Brian Cook, 4131 North Fulton. So I'm not opposed to the business itself, but I'm also concerned about the traffic on Buckingham and Samoset. These two streets run adjacent to the proposed business. So as a bit of context, love the investment in Sullivan Park. We spent a lot of time there. This park is also bordered by Buckingham and Samoset. And being there, we've seen firsthand the traffic that's cut through even before this business goes in. I think the business is going to be really popular. That's going to bring more traffic down these streets. Now, I know the retail part is going to be really small, which the economics I don't get, must be super high margin. It might be. But it's going to be the only dispensary that serves a pretty wide area. If you look at Birmingham, Beverly Hills, Berkeley, Southfield, other areas, this is the closest one to those areas. So I think it's going to be pretty popular. Now, there's 2 ways to access the business. One is Woodward, or the other is Greenfield through Samoset and Buckingham. So I know Woodward's the intent, right? This is where we expect people to come through. But if you're coming from Beverly Hills, Southfield, Southwest Birmingham, Western Berkeley, that favors the Greenfield to Samoset Buckingham corridor. If you look at Google Maps, and unfortunately, the maps from the proposal zoom in on the business, but if you zoom out, you'll see that corridor. We have a lot of curvy streets. These are 2 of the only 3 straight streets that go from Greenfield to Woodward. As one quick example, if you were to leave the business and you want to go to Beverly Hills or to Birmingham, you could either go up Samoset or Buckingham, turn right on Greenfield, left on 14. Or to go the same direction, you could turn right onto Woodward, Michigan left onto Woodward, stop at 14 at the light, Michigan left to South Woodward, stop again at the light at 14, then turn right. These 2 streets are the natural corridor to go in that direction. Just to put it simply, coming from the west side of Woodward, these 2 residential streets off of Greenfield will be the primary corridor. Waze is going to send traffic down there. So my ask tonight would be, before any approval or any recommendation is given, that there's a specific plan for the traffic flow to prevent those from going down Buckingham and Samoset. That's what I have. So thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Others who want to speak on this issue? Right here.
Hi, I'm Mick McGuire, 4456 Arlington. State of Michigan has approved the sale of marijuana, but it still is a federal crime. I don't want a store in my neighborhood that's committing a federal crime at this time. I don't see any reason why you need this. They want to locate this store right in a family neighborhood here. We got a lot of families, children here. They say they're going to have 3 people. Only 3 people can come up and go around into this store. What prevents it from just being some sort of large line out front of this store that's, I don't think it's going to look pretty shabby out on Woodward Avenue because there's a line of people buying marijuana. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going to improve my neighborhood at all, okay? I can't see how this is going to make life in our neighborhood better in any way, okay? Then he's talking about, he's going to be growing this stuff. He said, well, one thing he said something about some sort of chemical about being dangerous. This is kind of like a new field that you're talking about right now. We're talking about a whole new thing, growing marijuana. He's going to grow marijuana. He hasn't been growing marijuana in this store or whatever, this facility. I don't know how dangerous this whole thing is. And once you say, oh, okay, it's approved and you can just go ahead and do this, God knows what he's doing back there because you don't know and I don't know about growing marijuana and what danger there is to growing this stuff. Okay, you just have a mass amount of stuff growing there, and it's about certain processes here and fertilizers, and this could be dangerous. I don't know what, does this place blow up or what, So I don't know, I just don't see anything that's going to be good that's going to come out of this whole thing. Especially like, say, this thing, okay, we're only going to let 3 people in the store. Well, if there's 50 people wanting to buy marijuana, these people are going to be standing around outside the store, okay? This is going to look pretty shabby than me in my neighborhood. People standing outside waiting to buy marijuana. I mean, this just seems like a really bad idea. Parking lot, the way this is, you got to come to the front, you got to go around the back. I mean, I just don't see how this is going to work. Like I say, and God knows what kind of danger we're talking about here, because nobody here really knows about the process of growing marijuana. So how do we really know how safe this place really is growing marijuana? I don't know. Because he mentioned himself something about being dangerous. I never thought about it, but they brought it up. So, but thank you very much. And by the way, place looks great here. It's nice to go to New City Hall. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right here.
Good evening, Bill Harrison, 2729 Trafford. I don't have a dog in the hunt on this particular facility, but I do live 1 block east of Woodward, so I'm concerned about anything that happens on the Woodward corridor. It was mentioned about parking and that this is going to be a lesser impact on parking, but we haven't heard anything about how many employees are involved in this. And the calculations allow for 6 spaces for the retailer, and then the growing process 4. So that's a total of 10. And then we're hearing that you can have 3 people in the sales area at one time, and then you've got the stacking in the corridor. So I'm a little concerned that maybe the ordinance may be understated in terms of allowable, or the considerations for the number of people that the parking should accommodate. As far as odor is concerned, I recently retired at the end of September, but was in the architect and engineering business for almost 58 years, and one of the areas of my practice was air pollution control, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. I've contacted the can filter people, but have not had a response from them yet. And earlier on the restaurant property, Commissioner Douglas suggested that refer to the traffic committee for one of the issues. And I would suggest that you refer this to the engineering department regarding the efficacy of the proposed can filter. Now, the can filter uses activated carbon, which is kind of the typical solution to the odor control. But the question is, are they providing breakthrough analysis to make sure that the thing is working? Is this a draw-through or blow-through process? Typically, carbon absorption is a blow-through process. Recommended air changes per hour. In other words, are they adequately sizing these units given the spaces? And what is the filter flow rate per square foot or cubic foot of the air changes? How many air changes per hour are they looking for? So, and if the engineering department wanted to contact me, I can help them on some of these as well. As far as the location of the unit adjacent to the neighborhood, unfortunately, we learned when we were reviewing the Gatsby facility and then the one down by the waste paper people, that there is no criteria for location near residence. I mean, you know, we've got the 1,000 feet from the school and 1,000 feet from this, that, and the other thing, but unfortunately the ordinance doesn't address residential. I think that's something that should be considered by the city commission. So I guess that's pretty much it. Again, I would ask you to speak to the presenter about the number of employees in addition to the utilization of the facility.
All right,
thank you.
Anyone else in the audience who'd like to come up and speak on this issue? Way back there.
Hello, my name is Carl Lawlock. I live on Arden Place near Sheridan. So this is my neighborhood. I stand in enthusiastic support for this business. I think this part of Woodward drastically needs some decent businesses. Hopefully this business will bring in some other businesses so we can have our area of Woodward that's pretty vacant, filled with much more viable businesses that bring in tax dollars, plus the shared revenue from the state that's going to come back to Royal Oak. Stand in enthusiastic support of this business. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else in the audience over here?
Hi there, my name is Stephanie Hussman and I live on Buckingham. When I first heard about the dispensary opening, I was equal parts excited and a little bit hesitant. I was excited because that spot's been vacant for a while. I assumed that a dispensary that was going to be pretty highly scrutinized by pretty much everyone around it was going to be held to a higher standard of how it looks on the outside, how well it's kept up. I think everybody's going to have its eye on it. So I think that's something that could be really great for that area. But I'm hesitant for two reasons. First off is the traffic, which a lot of other people have addressed. We are a cut-through street, both Buckingham, Samoset, and Berkshire. And of course, when people cut through, they don't want to drive residential speeds. They want to drive 14-mile speed limits. It's just something we've always dealt with. I know this isn't the traffic commission, but it is something that when a business is going in that we have to think about how this is going to impact us. So that's one of my biggest concerns. And now looking at the parking lot, how it's only accessible, the entrance is only accessible from the front, I worry that people will park only on the side streets. We have the donut shop on the corner. That already has overflow parking up and down Buckingham, which causes bottlenecks right at the exit. And I'm sure this commission has heard a lot about people's issues with parking and how close they can be to specific businesses. I just worry that they're going to line the streets opposed to parking all the way in the back and walking all the way around to the front. My next issue deals with odor control. The plan states that the most common complaint is the presence of odor. I'm aware that the carbon filters are going to be installed, but it says to ensure that there will be minimal presence of marijuana odor. The problem that oftentimes happens when these buildings are retrofitted as grow operations is that even though these filters are in place and they're working perfectly, the building might not be sealed properly, or there might be an air imbalance, in which case odors can bypass those devices and escape through what's called fugitive routes. So I'm curious what the city's standards are in terms of odor. How is it going to be measured? What is the exact measurement? Is it 1 part odor to 7 parts natural purified air? Or filtered air, I'm sorry. I just want to know how to be measured. You know, some places actually have a scientific measurement. Other places, they just based on the number of calls they get. I'm just really worried about traffic, and then my house. I live 4 houses off Woodward, smelling like a grow operation. as much as I think public perception of marijuana facilities will totally change. It's going to be more like, I'm going to grab a bottle of wine. So I think that will change, but I don't know how many people will want to buy a house if it smells like weed. And again, maybe it won't. It's really hard to find information about these businesses because they are so new. So I'm looking specifically what Royal Oak's processes are in terms of odor, traffic, and just overall how it will affect our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else way in the back there also?
Hi, good evening. My name is James. I live on Arlington. I moved in 2015. I'm raising a family. I have my third child due in June. I'm very concerned how this would affect the crime in the area. I've got to look out for a bunch of little kids. It's very family friendly in the area. There's a lot of parks. My biggest concern is the crime. Mr. Kessler used the term user when he was describing the people coming into his place, and that's very frightening to me. That there's users now. They're not patrons. They're users. That's just what I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Over here.
I'll be very short and quick. My name's Carol Hodgen, and I live at 4325 Arlington. I'm a neighbor of James. I totally agree what he said. But I just want to remind the Planning Commission that when we talked about marijuana on Woodward, we talked about this several months ago, maybe it was a year ago, at the Golden Basket. And our subdivision was totally opposed. In fact, we had a call in because we had, the commission was only online. There were over 200 people in our neighborhood who were totally opposed to it. In fact, there had to be 2 commission meetings to listen to all these people. And I listened to them, all 200 plus of them, and there were about 5 people in our neighborhood who were brave enough to say, well, they're in favor of marijuana. But you know what? 3 out of the 5 said, I'm in favor of marijuana, but I don't want it in my neighborhood. Put it in a light industrial area. Now, nothing's happened to the Golden Basket. I don't know if you're moving it in to the Golden Basket, but the people in the neighborhood kind of felt, phew, relieved. It's not going in the Golden Basket. But now you're talking about a place that is like 2 blocks from the Golden Basket. I mean, didn't you get it that the neighborhood doesn't want it? I mean, some people want it, okay, but can't they go to the light industrial area? I believe that you're putting one in a light industrial area, but then you also wanted to put one close to Oakland Technical School, where we have high school students. And I believe that, if I'm correct from what I read in the paper, there is a certain number of feet it has to be away from the school. But one group, I don't know if it's the Planning Commission or City Commission, said, no, we can go closer. We don't have to pay attention to that road. I don't know. All I know is I'm not in favor of marijuana on Woodward, period. Actually, I'm not in favor of marijuana, but it's the law in the city. So put it in a light industrial area. I'm not saying I'm representing 200 people, but that's how they felt about marijuana in Golden Basket. And now you're talking about putting it, I don't know, 2 blocks away. It's just crazy. I've lived in Royal Oak for 50 years, and it's been a neighborhood wonderful for children. Our houses have appreciated, can't complain about that. But what is a marijuana store? How does that look? Not only how does it look, but how does it affect our children and the whole family and our homes, etc. So I'm totally opposed to it. I don't care what kind of trees you put around it. I don't care how beautiful the building looks. That's all. Put it in the light industrial area where People won't be as upset. But I bet you, if we did a survey of our neighborhood,
your time
a
is up.
lot of
Thank
people
you.
would be upset about it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Way there in the back.
Thank you for letting me talk. I've been impacted personally by marijuana back in the military. I know what it can do to an individual. From that standpoint, it is an illegal federal substance that we don't want in our area. The gentleman in ventilation talked about the filtration and the scrubbers in there. I know they don't work. I'm an environmental specialist. I have recently tested a facility that had breakthroughs on 8 Mile and Mound, and they shut them down because of the breakthroughs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this issue? Please don't forget to introduce yourself.
Hi, Michael Pilarski. I live in Buckingham. I'm going to reiterate some of the things I heard some of my neighbors said, but some that was said, and I looked in the plan, I found nothing about consideration about the traffic and any concerns. We do have, I'm on Buckingham, Samoset. These are streets that are going to have entry and exiting where they can go and make more traffic. And again, the speeding is there. Again, it's a traffic issue. And then a couple other gentlemen hit upon the other topic of the odor. And again, within the plan, they're using qualitative type of terms. So how will it be measured and controlled such that it is kept under control to what levels? Thank you.
Thank you. Please come up.
Hi, my name is Linda Capella. I live at 4236 Buckingham. We've been there for 43 years. We're adjacent to the parking lot, so this is in my backyard. I'd like to thank my neighbors for coming up and expressing their concerns. I'll try not to repeat some of the things that they've asked. Basically, my concerns have been negative secondary impact due to traffic, parking, the number of parking spaces, and the odor mitigation. Excuse me. Regarding the traffic, I think a lot has been said about that. I agree with the gentleman that asked, please, can we do a traffic study before there's an approval? Regarding the parking spaces, what I was wondering is, how do we know that the 10 required spaces is adequate for this business? Mr. Kessler mentioned in his plan, business plan of $91,000 per month is the expectation. I think the good question would have been, what is that based on as far as the average sale and the number of customers? At that rate, at 91 per month, we're talking about 4 to 5 patrons every hour that they're open. With the 5 employees that are also indicated in the plan, is that enough parking? Did the parking plan include the retail, the waiting area, as well as the retail area? So those were some of my questions. The other thing on the odor mitigation, what I was wondering is there a potential that there's a trade-off between the filtration systems creating excessive noise, fan noise? I mean, if you've ever had to listen to AC systems or fan systems or your neighbor's generator during a storm, would there be a trade-off? So there's nothing in the plan that has a rating on that as far as a decibel rating. Green infrastructure, I think all of you touched on that as well, and Mr. Kessler indicated his plan for additional trees. But what is the purpose of that infrastructure? Is it to maybe beautify that parking lot? Maybe to block some of the traffic from the neighboring homes? The other question I have as far as the current condition of the building, and in particular the the parking lot and the alleyway. The alleyway has quite a bit of broken asphalt, and which is leading to a lot of potholes and flooding in that area. The parking lot itself is flooding with the with the snow being moved to the corner. It's flooding the 3 backyards now. So some permeable material in that space, I think, would really help that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Way in the back there. Please introduce yourself. You got 3 minutes.
Mr. Casada, it's a pleasure. Clyde Esbury, 4135 South Fulton Place. Life is a lot better on this side of the podium, let me tell you now. The reason I'm here speaking this evening, not specifically in support of this particular business, but in all the site plans that I reviewed on my many years on that board, this site plan is not deficient in any way. They've addressed all the major concerns that any site plan should have when they are going into any type of business, irregardless of it being marijuana or not. But I think the one point that is being drastically overlooked is the voters of Michigan have spoken. The voters of Royal Oak have spoken. Of course, if you're going to have recreational marijuana, you are going to have a retail component. Where do you put a retail business? You put it in general business. That is what the Woodward Corridor is designed for. This is a perfect location for that. I do believe that down the road we may end up looking at some sort of traffic mitigation effort on those 2 streets, because it is true as the 2 streets just south of 14 Mile, there could be issues there. But in terms of, I've heard reference about users creating crime problems in my neighborhood. Frankly, I find that offensive. I'm not worried about my home value. I raised 2 kids in this neighborhood. I'm a longtime resident. This business will be an addition to this neighborhood. I have no concerns about it whatsoever, and I look forward to you hopefully approving this plan this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this issue? In the back there. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I also live on Buckingham, and so I'm also, I think just to reiterate some concerns that people had, also just kind of the safety and then the odor. I know they kind of mentioned that they're going to kind of control it in the building, but also just concerned as people will be parking on the streets that they're going to be bringing it to the park, and there will be a lot more people kind of smoking marijuana in that park, so that's going to be affecting the neighborhood around also. I also recently bought a house in that area, kind of for the nice area and family friendly, and so I'm also kind of concerned about decreased home value with that being closed and maybe not as many families wanting to move there. And then again with the traffic, they're kind of through streets, so I'm also concerned about all the traffic coming through.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this issue? Anyone? All right, if we've exhausted the people who want to speak, we will bring it back. We'll close the public hearing, seeing none, and we'll bring it back to this side of the table for discussion. Further questions from Mr. Twing or the petitioner, and discussion between the commissioners. Commissioner Douglas.
I'll ask this question of Mr. Leal, I guess. In terms of odor control, and I'll preface it by saying that this applicant and all applicants have gone through a long and extremely rigorous process by the city staff, the city manager, city attorney, the building department, the code enforcement department. So they've jumped through a lot of hoops before they've gotten here. And but I'd specifically like to know how we set and how we will monitor standards for odor control.
As far as specific requirements within our regulations, and I would refer to Tim Twing on that or to Joseph Murphy, but there are, apart from that, there are provisions in the zoning ordinance that touch upon airborne emissions and specifically odors and how they can create a nuisance to surrounding property owners. That would be based on a complaint basis where we would then investigate and we determine that the odor is filtering into the surrounding homes, which closest to the business, and we could always take action in that way in the form of a citation and then prosecution.
The other portion is whether or not we can then commence proceedings to revoke a special land use. Again, I defer to that process as far as administrative revocation to Mr. Twing and Mr. Murphy for that, but there are provisions in there. As far as setting limits on what is properly acceptable or not, that is a very engineering exercise where you would have to hire a special consultant that would have to measure based on, before and after the business starts entering, what type of odors may be escaping, and then also establishing baseline limits. That's a very extensive process and expensive process to do. We don't have that type of process built in ordinance for any type of business. It can be done. It's not something that is currently within our ordinances to regulate in that manner.
Okay, so maybe I need to direct my attention to the planning department. I'm assuming that the engineering, the standards for these businesses have certain parameters as to how you control odor. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Mr. Twing or Mr. Murphy?
Well, I'll take the first stab in terms of general, in terms of compliance with any code. Obviously, this project is going through special land use and site plan approval at this point going up through. So the submission that you see in front of you is addressing those issues.
Mm-hmm.
If the Planning Commission recommends approval and the City Commission blesses it, then they'll be granted their license under the city's licensing ordinance. That licensing ordinance is reviewed annually. So any of the code, after that occurs, then they'll be able to submit for building permits and engineering permits to show that they comply with the building code, the HVAC codes in terms of odors and things. Their architect or engineer will have to submit those plans and specifications on how they're supposed to work. The building office will review them and say, okay, they've been approved and they are currently operating correctly. If we get a complaint, I think the gentleman referred to the idea that it was inspected and they shut them down. These are very highly regulated businesses, very similar to, even more so than a business that sells alcohol. The city reviews those on an annual basis to show they're in compliance. So this business will get reviewed on an annual basis, as with any other marijuana establishment, to address these issues. If there's compliance issues, there's an opportunity to address them, whether that's odor, operational issues in terms of they've got a plan that say how they're going to operate this business to make sure they're continuing to do that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to address odor. Traffic, in terms of cut-through traffic, is a little different animal in the sense that I think that would be addressed somewhat after it's open, but there are ways to address that through other provisions. This business complies with the city's parking standard. There's nothing I can do to make them provide more parking. Zero. It's not based on how many employees they have, it's based on the established ordinance. What I will say, some businesses are fine with parking under those provisions and they have more than necessary. Others aren't. But they comply. There's nothing we can do in regards to how many more parking spots they have. But I don't know if that addressed your question. Code-wise, in terms of building code issues, that's going to occur if this gets blessed down the road.
I see. Okay, other commissioners may have questions and we'll maybe carry on there. I have some comments later, but I'll stop for now.
All right, I don't know who was first. Mr. Gantino.
So there's obviously a lot of concern expressed regarding the traffic. I think, unfortunately, the traffic issue is probably more of a consequence of the street patterns more than anything else, sort of independent than any business that would be located here. Any successful business that would be here would generate traffic, and I don't think that's necessarily the issue per se. But my question is really to Mr. Twing. In terms of applicants that come before us in traffic, excuse me, traffic impact studies that are done, is there a threshold in terms of the types of projects or the intensity of use or anything along those lines that would automatically kick off a traffic impact study as part of their contingencies? Or is it typical that any sort of traffic study that would be requested is just a function of the individual project itself and a particular body or commission's desire to have that done?
There is no ordinance requirement that says you have to have a traffic study at this point in time. There are occasions when staff in its internal review will say we'd recommend one to this body, or we'd ask the applicant to provide one. And there could be a host of factors that kick that in the sense of driveway placements, volume, size of development. This is a fairly small building. It's 4,000 square feet. As was indicated, there are some operations that generate higher demand. I don't see that here, but I'm not going to say there's not potential for cut-through traffic because I don't know where the customers are coming from, and any traffic study would simply be guessing as well.
Sure. So carrying on with that thought, then there was nothing that is proposed or indicated on their plan that would give anyone within your department any cause to think that this would increase any existing traffic patterns based on the ordinance, what they proposed, and no. Yep. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think I want to circle back to the two things that I heard from public comment tonight, and I appreciate folks coming out to help identify what the concerns are so we can ask the questions. The odor, I mean, we have an ordinance 770-93 that deals with airborne emissions, and while Commissioner Douglas asked about specific metrics, I know we've had to look at this before, where it talks about any sort of perception at the property line. So if we have any odor going into, let's say, an adjoining property, which would mean to any of the properties, if it's going back further than the adjoining properties, then we have the ability to cite, we have remedies, legal remedies outside the annual licensing. You know, we can start issuing citations if it's not fixed or remedied. And I thought it was interesting, the individual that brought up the trade-off between noise and odor. I didn't really think about that. But we also, that's where we actually do have some numbers in there where we can measure the decibels, whether it's a air conditioner or a filtration system. So we have something, maybe it's not directly in the marijuana ordinance, but it's, Mr. Layout, there's something in there that allows the city to enforce, like you said, any odor issues, whether it's a fast food restaurant there or a marijuana establishment or whatever it may be. Yes. If we get complaints, we can field cite, and then if we wanted to go out and bring out measuring to prosecute the case further, we could, you know, pay that money as the prosecutor as evidence if we needed, but those mediums are there already in our...
A more common complaint is light.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Casada brings that up all the time.
Yeah, I'm waiting for him to bring that up.
A very much more common
Never
one
miss
is,
an opportunity.
It's not necessarily odor, but lights from commercial properties, and those are dealt with through...
And then Mr. Twing, maybe on the parking, remind me again, we have 1.5 spots, I think, per 200 square feet?
For the retail portion.
For retail, and how does that stack up against... I thought we accommodated a little bit more for these establishments.
Yeah, a normal retail store would only requires less.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, depending on where it's at. But yeah, I remember we beefed it up because we didn't know like how these things are going to go. Okay, so but I do think that, you know, when you look at the map, Mr. Gantina makes a good point. You know, the traffic. It's interesting. I hear what my colleagues think, but you know, regardless of what goes in there, you're going to have that issue, and I think that's probably something we need to talk about just in general in this area. If we're seeing cut through between Greenfield and Woodward, there's always tools out there like no parking, local traffic only, you know, whatever. There's a whole menu of items that can be looked at. Okay, thank you for those clarifications. Appreciate it.
All right, other questions or comments? All right, I have a couple. Just to echo the issue about traffic, I heard a lot about the traffic, and I would agree that anything that goes in there, any successful business will generate more traffic. What I heard was this is already a problem because it's already a cut-through problem right now. So maybe this issue needs to be addressed in another forum. I don't know what the citizens do to ask for, some relief. I know in other areas of the city there have been, as the mayor says, restrictions on who can cut through and all that stuff. That seems like it's a problem that already exists, whether this business goes in or not. I also have a question, I guess it would be for our attorney. There was a question about smoking in the park. Is marijuana smoking allowed in the parks?
In the state of Michigan, no public area.
Yeah, I do not know the answer to that. I would typically ask our prosecutor that question. But,
okay.
But I know there are regulations in surrounding the use of marijuana, specific locations. I cannot tell you that right now.
All right. I have a couple of questions for the petitioner, if he doesn't mind to come back up. Okay, so I am definitely not an expert, but I did have an opportunity to visit a grow facility on the other side of the state in connection with my work. And I'm curious on how the interior of this is going to be built out, because I know that you try to reduce the potential for mold or disease. I know when I went in, I had to wear a hazmat. They made me wear a hazmat outfit. Tell me about the interior build out in terms of where the plants are.
Okay, so you have the floor plan. Basically, since there is retail and there is grow, those will be, I believe it's a 3-hour firewall to prevent anything there. And then as far as within the grow rooms, kind of like what you already explained, the people of your other grow that you walked into, it is very important for us to keep everything very clean. That includes odors, funguses, anything floating in the air, traffic into the building as well too. So normally what we'll do, as far as if you want to get into like the building aspects of it, we'll just be using like a drywall, and then that will be primed, and then they'll have an epoxy paint on it. So every time a harvest is done in each and every room, those rooms will be scrubbed down, cleansed, and the next harvest will come in after that.
I guess what I'm trying to get an image of, so the rooms where the plants are how are they sealed? There was a question about this from the audience, and it prompted me to bring this up, because the grow facility I was at was like being in a beer cooler. You had to open up the door, and it had the grommet on it, and you had to close the door. What kind of facility are you planning?
Okay, so there are multiple. I am familiar with the one that you're talking about there. Those are usually for like higher ceilings. They basically just make cubicles and box those in.
Yeah, there was a series of cubicles inside the building, yes.
Yeah, so this will be more so what you call stick and board with steel studs, drywall, and every single one of those walls will be sealed off, because it's required by the city once we go through the building department. As far as those will have to either be 1 hour up to 3-hour fire rated walls, which means they're completely sealed.
Okay, so just following up with the construction here, so you've got you plan to have odor control in there, and where I was, they had that too. What I didn't appreciate one way or the other is, does the odor control have extra air handling units or some other mechanism that is going to generate additional sound?
No, actually these blower fans that come with the can filters, they're actually pretty quiet. Those would be inside of the building. And what those do is those basically scrub the air before any of the rooftop units can exhaust it. Within these facilities, however, we try to minimize the amount of air circulation that comes from the interior to the exterior of the building, because then that air has to basically be conditioned inside, which uses energy and costs money. So with that, very minimal amount of air will actually be exhausted into the air for anybody to smell.
Okay, you're recirculating it.
Correct. Yeah.
Is this facility? Do you sell both medical and recreational? I don't think we asked that question.
No. So this is just considered adult use. Medical patients can come in and purchase, or anyone 21 years age older.
Okay, so
as long as
both.
they are 21, yes.
All right. All right. And you have not operated such a business before?
No, sir. I don't know if there's too many of these in the state of Michigan. I was one of the first actual applicants with the state of Michigan for a micro business.
All
And it's
right.
been, I believe, over 3 years now that I've been pre-qualified with the state.
Okay, very good. That was my series of questions. Any other questions for the petitioner as long as we got them? All right, thank you. All right, back to this side of the table. Further discussion on the special land use, or motion, or questions from Mr. Twing, or comments? Mr. Cantina.
I guess I'll just make some comments. So when I was initially looking at this, sustainability is always at top of mind for me in terms of what I'm considering on projects. And I was a little bit, I guess, more eager to look at this one because we specifically asked for these types of businesses to include low-impact development amenities in what they proposed. When I was reading through the packet and just seeing, excuse me, the rain barrels that were proposed, I was a little bit disappointed in how they had responded to that low-impact development requirement. However, having seen the presentation and understanding the plan a little bit better, I actually think that they've done quite a bit to address that low-impact development requirement. Otherwise, I feel everything that the applicant has offered is compliant with what the ordinance is requiring. Certainly there were some concerns that were expressed. As far as what's in front of us today, though, we've got limited things that our purview is limited to. So based on that, I think they meet all the requirements, and I would be in support of approval.
Is that a motion?
It was just a comment, but
Sorry,
I certainly can make a motion to approve the special land use is what we're on right now.
That's what we're on.
Yes.
Yes.
Make a motion to approve the special land use for SP 2203-03 based on the basis of determination that has been listed.
All right, is there a second?
Support.
Support from Mr. Klooster. All right, so we have a motion from Mr. Gantina to approve recommend approval of the special land use based on meeting the requirements. Second by Mr. Klooster. Is there further discussion on this matter? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll just add, I've said this at other discussions about marijuana. Personally, I'm really surprised that 70% of the people in Royal Oak on the ballot approved the legalization of marijuana, especially the retail use of it in our city, let alone the state. I personally don't believe it's the end of times, but I don't see it as this big economic stimulus or anything that's going to, lift the city. But in terms of the will of the voters, this commission, or at least our city commission, was obligated to put legislation in place that permitted a limited number of establishments in the city of Royal Oak. We define those to certain commercial and industrial districts. In fact, we have two petitioners already having an open one in some of our industrial, one in the south and one in the north in those industrial districts. And we had people come out too, neighbors within, 1,000, 10,000 feet. I don't know. It depends on where you live, I guess. But, there's always going to be an issue. Where do these establishments go? The voters are clear they want them. We struggle to figure out, the best remedies, and we put a lot into the application process and staff's recommendations, and then here we are today. However, when it comes to actually the special land use and site plan and all of that, and maybe some of this is more site plan, but the traffic concerns and the odor concerns, are legitimate concerns. We look at 4 to 5 patrons every hour. That's pretty low for retail. I'm going to guess with my 3 kids, I'm probably doing that in my neighborhood every hour between soccer, lacrosse. I don't even know what my kids are involved in. I just get in the car and drive. I'm sure my neighbors across the street are very annoyed with us coming in and out every day. and I think the cut-through traffic is an issue there, and I think that would come and be actually worse if there were another type of retail establishment there that would get, 20, 30, 40 patrons an hour if it were a restaurant or whatever it may be. I think we need to address that issue independently. I think we all agree that that's something that we have to look into, because inevitably a business is going to go there, and that's going to create traffic, maybe even worse. So that risk to me is a little bit tempered, because in the inevitability this is a commercial corridor, a business is going to go there, and it's something we have to address in a different capacity. The odor is an interesting one. Like I said, we do have, through the licensing ordinance, we can deny the license every year. If there are big issues, we can cite them immediately. If there's smell concerns, we have ordinances in place already in general to address those issues. So I feel like while those are legitimate concerns, we do have the tools in place to remedy and manage any negative outcomes that are unlikely but could happen. So, as planning commissioners, it's incumbent upon us to look at very specific criteria. Even though, no offense to the petitioner, that I don't get excited about marijuana. Like I said, I don't take it or leave it. It's nothing that I'm passionate about. I still am required to look at the criteria, and we have to look at it through a lens of experience. We have to look at it through a lens of, to some extent, science and reasonability. And so, that's what we really, for everyone in here, the arguments about crime and all of these other things, that we have very specific criteria we have to look at. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. But those are my rambling comments at the moment.
All right, any other comments? All right, I'll just make one. I will support the motion, and the reason is not that none of the concerns are legitimate. They are legitimate, but even more so, this is a new type of business. All this is new. Our ordinance is new. Our ordinance hasn't been tested. Applying these criteria, these ordinances, is all something that we've never done before, and there is some unknown there. And I think the traffic, the odor, the noise, those are legitimate. But we do have, if we find that those things that we're worried about actually do come to fruition, and they are a problem, there are mechanisms to deal with them. We've heard about from several different ways to do that, including review of the license. But there's also the code issues, the zoning issues, and other enforcement. And so there are mechanisms in place to deal with that. I'm sure this is going to evolve over time, but the Woodward Corridor is where you put retail, and that's what this is. So I'm going to support. Any other comments before we call for the vote? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. All right. No nays. We have a unanimous recommendation on the motion to make a recommendation to the City Commission to approve the site plan as stated.
No, special land.
I keep saying it the second time I did that. Special land use. Now we'll move to the site plan. All right, Mr. Twing, is there anything you'd like to add to the site plan commentary that you already provided?
No, there's the City Commission action on it. There are some cleanup items in regards to labeling and corrections on the site plan. We did suggest that there be additional landscaping and evergreen trees to be replaced with deciduous trees, and I believe the petitioner has agreed to all those as part of their presentation. So I'm not aware of any issues. If there's something the Planning Commission would like to change or add, that would be totally up to you.
All right, and all right, any questions for Mr. Twing? Commissioner Douglas.
Mr. Twing, the area in front of this business is public right-of-way owned by the state of Michigan. Do we have the ability, and as you look at this business, that's where people are going to park. They'll park there if they can, and then if they can't, they'll go around and park in back. Do we have the ability to require businesses to repave that area?
Yes. and we are actually suggesting that they put landscaping in the corner where it's currently paved on the southwest corner of Woodward and Samoset. We are actually, and their plan depicts that as far as taking out the paved area. And they are restriping it. But if you feel there's other improvements that need to be done there, you have the ability as part of the approval to include those.
So I'll be interested in hearing comments from my fellow commissioners, because my inclination is to ask them to, I look at that right of way and I see damage and potholes, and this photo is a couple years old on Google Maps, and I look at their parking lot, and I think their parking lot it does not do credit to the business, and so I'm inclined to ask them to repave the parking lot. But I'll be interested to hear what my fellow commissioners say on that subject.
All right. Mr. Mayor.
I'll give my thoughts. I mean, I agree it needs work. My only concern about dictating a repave is, are there conditions to make it permeable? Like, I'd like to see, if we are going to do something, make it look nice, and then also the continuity with the other businesses that are along that strip too. How does that fit into it in terms of, you know what I mean? They're kind of all connected. So what does that look like?
Well, and I will go a step further. Because it's MDOT's right of way, MDOT will eventually have to approve and issue the permit for the right of way. They are receptive to certain types of improvements in the Woodward right of way, and they are not receptive to others. So depending on where you wanted to go with it, they may or may not be agreeable to certain types of activity, particularly certain trees, heights of trees, things like that. Yeah. The parking lot, since it's on private property, obviously you have all the discretion under the permits being issued there.
All right, I guess I would just make a clarification here. The west parking lot on the other side of the alley, I was out there today, I took a look at it. I mentioned the damaged area over by the dumpster. I think it has some life left in it. You might, if you were to add the requirement for repaving, Mr. Twing, wouldn't they have to put stormwater detention in?
Well, they may have to address that anyways.
So there is no detention now?
There's no catch basins there.
I don't believe so, because it doesn't look as there is based on its paving. But under the stormwater ordinance, the city engineer evaluates the improvements being done to a building to determine whether or not they have to put it in. So they may be required to do it anyways. I'm not saying they are, but they may.
All right, thank you. Let me ask, Mr. Cantina.
So yeah, I just wanted to echo the mayor's statements. If we are talking about potentially asking for repaving of either the MDOT right-of-way or the private parking lot, if that is up for discussion, I would echo the comments that I would like to see us require permeable pavement in some percentage go back in those paved areas. If nothing's planned to be touched and it didn't need to be touched, I think that's a little bit of a tall ask for an applicant. But if we are considering asking them to actually do some paving work in either area, I would ask them to consider at least some portion of it to be permeable pavement. Understand that MDOT has their own guidelines and it may not fly with them.
All right.
If I may respond to that, I mean, the challenge to that is the soil. And whether or not it's even receptive to permeable pavers. And the challenge for us is that for us to say put in permeable pavers, is it the whole thing? Is it half of it? And then, what if the engineering department or their engineers say, dude, it's all clay there, we can't put permeable pavers in. The management of that process is going to, I fear, is going to be unwieldy. And maybe Mr. Twing could help us figure out a path towards that.
Well, and I think what we can do is I can ask the engineer to review it, and if it's practical, if you want to add it as a potential contingency subject to staff and the city engineer, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think I'd like to request that. Again, I don't want to force a repaving of either area to get the permeability in there. That's not my intent. My intent is if we're touching those areas that we look at those solutions. I guess I would also follow that up with the fact that they're already proposing it in the dumpster area. So from an engineering perspective, there is already engineering that's going to have to happen to make that a functioning pervious area. To your comment, Shar, the underlying area of the permeable surface does need to be able to accept the water, but that's an engineering challenge. Certainly soils are a component of that challenge, but it's dealt with regularly, and it can be, the solution can be engineered regardless of the soil.
Well, if I may, just item 11 on your contingencies indicates that they have to comply, obviously, with all other city codes and ordinances. And included in that is the city engineers in terms of the right-of-way as well as compliance with the city's storm detention ordinances. So if the city engineer determines that in order to comply, they need to put in a retention system. The planning commission is looking for some portion of it to be permeable. And that's what I'm reading from your...
I would say you're reading the tea leaves correctly.
Yes.
All right, other questions or comments here from the commissioners? Or a motion?
I would like to make a motion. I'm making motion to approve the site plan with the listed contingencies, modifying contingency 2D to read, landscaped islands shall be installed in the parking area per ordinance requirements as part of a low impact green infrastructure system as directed and coordinated with engineering staff.
All right, and just a clarification, so the difference there from what we had is that the islands are going to be subject to coordination with the staff and are going to be part of a low impact system. That's what you're saying.
Right, basically it's not going to have a curb on it, so the water can run into it.
Okay.
Or it's got a troughed curb similar to what we have on our streetscapes. So something in collaboration with the engineering department that meets city standards, but it's part of a low impact infrastructure system.
All right. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Mr. Gantina. Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Klooster to approve the site plan with all the approved contingencies, modifying 2D to add the review by and coordination with the department and to be part of a low impact system. Second by Mr. Gantina. Is there
any interest at the commission of requiring them to repave the right-of-way in front of their establishment subject to the requirements of MDOT? I'll try that. I'll make a motion to add that, to modify the motion to add that, and we'll see how it flies.
all right? Is there a second?
I'll second it. I don't see why not.
Okay, Mayor seconds it, and the motion is to modify Mr. Klooster's motion to add a requirement to repave the Woodward right-of-way in conformance with with the MDOT standards.
Yes.
Okay. So, just procedurally here, we have a motion that we're asking to modify. So before we talk about the motion, we need to know if it's going to be modified, I think. So let's talk about Commissioner Douglas's motion and dispose of that one way or the other. That would be my intention. Is there comments about this? Questions? I have a question. So one of the things that struck me about this is, Mr. Twing, is that the parking analysis you did included the entire building. You got three different businesses, but you included all three businesses, right?
Yes.
And how does that translate here? Because the end business here is that whose right away are we talking about? Is it just in front of the person who owns this building, or because you've got other businesses owned by other people there?
Well, the improvements that we're looking at are from the corner of Samuelset down to the end of their property line.
Is that end
Yes.
end business is also their property?
No.
Okay, so they would go in the right of way in front of the other
Correct.
person's property is what we're talking about here.
Yep.
And would it have to go all the way down then to the corner of Buckingham and Woodward?
No, just to the end of their property line.
So it would stop at Subway, basically?
The south end of Subway, that's what we're talking about?
The
So it includes the studio and runs up to the line between their business and Subway,
All right.
right?
Right. It's
Yes.
just what's depicted on the...
Okay, so I have a question. Do we know what MDOT's requirements are?
Well, the engineering department will review this based on your contingencies. They'll have them design it per that. They'll just have to go to MDOT and get the final permit. Generally, our city engineering department has a handle on what it is. MDOT either agrees or may send back comments on it.
Okay, well, one question, a follow-up question I have is I thought on the site plan there was a suggestion that sort of triangle-shaped corner there at Samoset and Woodward might be landscaped. Is that something that MDOT does? Is that something
They
that's
would
something
agree
that-
to it, yes.
Is that something we would then propose to them and they would dispose of it?
They're going to have to, yeah, they'll have to put it on their engineered drawings. Then it would all go to MDOT for the final permit. They won't let us put a tree there. We can put grass, we can put a lot of other things there, but they generally won't let us put a tree there.
All right. All right. Further discussion on Commissioner Douglas's motion. Should we, do we have some idea of what kind of cost we would be asking the petitioner to put up for something like that? I guess I'm a little foggy on what we're asking for there. If they repave that, that doesn't factor into the stormwater detention, or does it?
No, but they'll have to design it so that the stormwater flows along Woodward Avenue correctly. They're going to have to correct this anyways to make sure the openings are correct and make that island longer. They've got corrections they're going to have to do out there anyways.
Oh, well, could you explain that real quick?
Well, obviously, they are doing the corner, as you see up on, that's currently paved, and it currently has parking that faces the wrong direction.
Yep.
And so this island is one we'd already suggested, and they've depicted on their plan. They're restriping the parallel from what was currently angled. There may be a need to shorten or lengthen this curb island based on this plan. What I've heard now is the motion from Commissioner Douglas is to repave that segment as well of roadway or parking area.
Parking lot, yes. Okay. All right, further discussion on this motion to modify Mr. Klooster's motion. Any further comments? Well, if there are no further comments, then I guess we will call for the vote. So we're going to call for the vote on the motion to modify Mr. Klooster's motion to have the petitioner repave the parking area in the right-of-way pursuant to MDOT standards. That's the motion, to add that to Mr. Klooster's motion. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, say nay. Nay. So let's count those up. Mr. Klooster was a
No.
Yes.
no, yes.
No.
Okay, so the motion does not pass. So we move on to discuss Mr. Klooster's motion, which was to approve the site plan with the contingencies with the one modification. Are there any more comments, questions, discussion of this motion, or are we ready for a vote? If I don't see any, Mr. Gantino.
Well, I guess I want to bring up one thing real quick. So the traffic island in the right of way that we just discussed is included on their drawings. That is going to be a greenscaped island. We've had applicants come before us that vehemently disagreed with that because they couldn't keep that grass alive out there. Some other plantings. I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is should we discuss that island being designed as a low impact method, just like we're talking about the traffic island in the parking lot to the rear?
Well, I have a question about that. Does that low impact? Well, I'm going to ask a question. You're probably going to answer it. Is that dependent on the grade, the slope? Can you put those anywhere you feel like, or don't you? Isn't that somewhat dictated by whether or not the elevations are permitted?
Yeah, you're correct. It's the grading essentially determines whether or not you can do that. Also, MDOT is unlikely going to let you do what that would require in the right of way.
So that's the kicker for me. If we don't think that it's something that MDOT would be receptive to, then I don't think we should propose it.
So does it need to be Kentucky bluegrass sod? No. There's other vegetation that is low enough that it's not going to upset MDOT and hardy enough that it's going to withstand all the salts and nastiness that come off of woodwork.
All right, and that is already in the contingencies. Is going to be the paving's coming out of that little triangle, and it's going to be a landscape island, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions on Mr. Klooster's motion? All right. I'm going to call for the vote on Mr. Klooster's motion to approve the site plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right. The motion passes. The site plan is approved with the stated contingencies. Congratulations. Good luck to you. And I'm sure we'll see you around.
Congratulations.
Take care. All right. Next order of business is the master plan request for proposal. Mr. Twing, in your packet there, you provided us your draft there. Tell us about it.
Well, actually, Mr. Murphy has been working on this very diligently for the last while, so I will let him kind of walk you through it. And I know you've may have comments or revisions, but
last month, the Planning Commission narrowed down the list to 5 firms that you believed were qualified to submit a response to our request for a new master plan. And then you asked staff to develop a RFP before we release it, that you have the opportunity to review that language and make any modifications or corrections that you think is necessary to accurately reflect what we're trying to obtain from these 5 particular firms. So hopefully you had the opportunity to review that language and be happy to go over any specific comments that you have, changes, modifications, clarifications, corrections, what have you.
All right. Are there questions for Mr. Murphy or comments? Commissioner Douglas.
So Ms. Beakey has spent, who's not here with us tonight, has spent, I think, a great deal of time going over this and has in her career a lot of experience. So while this is a staff-driven process, it's up to you to decide what the best course of action is. I do hope you'll take to heart the recommendations that she's offered and incorporate those that make sense to you. But I'm going to make clear that this is a staff-driven decision. I am interested in your feedback, though, on her recommendation that we use a point system, a scoring system in evaluating proposals. Mr. Murphy, Mr. Twing, thoughts on that subject?
Sure. If you'd like, I think it's a short enough document with Ms. Beakey's comments. We can simply go over it. I can zoom in on it. It's on the screen in front of you. And I think it would be best just to address all of the points I think it's a small enough document that we can do that, and the group can provide staff with direction versus us assuming what you may or may not want to include. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to just go through the document and I'll zoom in on it.
Okay,
so
please proceed.
So that we can get an understanding. There's some reference to limiting the number of pages associated with a firm's response. As I would hesitate to limit a firm's ability to convey to us what they want to achieve, how they can achieve it. I think it's an unnecessary statement in order to limit the number of pages. Perhaps you feel differently.
Do we want to take these things on at each point?
Sure. We just go straight down the list.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll just ask Mr. Murphy, do most of these come in, I mean, considering we narrowed it down to professional firms, I imagine they all have their like standard book that they do, that they modify and update and, calibrate to the task at hand. Do you see, do you have an issue? I mean, these usually, you get some that have 10 pages and some that are 1,000, or are they mostly all kind of in the same neighborhood?
There's certainly more than 10 or 12 pages.
Well, I know. I'm just trying to make an extreme, it's so volatile and so variable that...
No, I think the more information that you can get, the better.
Okay.
To clarify what they're proposing and who their team is, so that you can make the utmost important decision to select them or not. So I think it would be restrictive to limit them to a number of pages, a maximum number of pages.
But we have, in our cover letter, they would kind of give us summarizing everything that they do, right? I mean, there's your limit right there to kind of give you the highlights, what they feel their USPs are, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. But usually qualifications and references and scope of work, that's where that typical set of documents that they have and they may tweak, that's certainly in excess of 12 pages.
Yeah, no.
And that was conveyed easily with the request for qualifications that you reviewed.
Yep.
All right, any other questions on that?
I'll just comment as a professional who has to do RFPs a lot. They're incredibly expensive and time consuming to do. Rarely are they filled with fluff. So anything that's in there is worth reading.
Right.
And setting a maximum, I don't think it helps us in any way.
I agree.
All right.
Well, I guess unless you want to incorporate them, I think we'll probably just move on from them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, maybe that's the process we do, is you just go down. If anyone sees anything they want to incorporate, then just raise your hand.
I would agree. Okay.
So the next one is similar, limiting the cover letter to one page. I think based on the comments that seems to be something that you're not interested in. Qualifications and experience. There's some additional language with regard to that. There's also reference to a maximum number of pages, which I'll presume that your comments and everybody agreed that was unnecessary.
I have a response to this one though. We did in our request for qualification. We got a bunch of qualifications about the firms, the lead firms and the other firms that will be involved. So I do wonder if we shouldn't direct them to give us additional information or specific information about the people. I mean, just repeating inviting them to repeat all the same qualifications, it does seem to me a little silly. That would be my comment. I think we should, if we're going to ask them who their personnel are, who's they actually going to put on the job, we would want those people's qualifications. But it seems like we're asking for the firm qualifications again. I think the personnel is more important.
Yes, some of the staffs putting that particular language in there, our thought was they were in the request for qualifications. They were simply identifying who in the past, other firms that they had worked with on different projects. They were not specifying who they would work with on this particular project.
That would be that would be the definition of firm qualifications.
Yes.
That's what I say. So we don't need firm qualifications again. That's just my thought.
If they identified
unless they want to tell us something additional.
If they identified a different firm that they didn't previously,
yeah,
yes, then I think it's important.
Are you saying then, Gary, though, that identifying the actual personnel that they would
Yeah,
be putting on
I think
this?
I think that's more important. I'm just reacting to the idea that we're asking them for the firm qualification seems to be redundant. That's all.
I agree
We
with
should
that.
focus on who you're going to give us. Who's your team?
Understandably so.
But her suggested change does reference that as well. It may reference other things, but isn't. It's kind of hard for me to see. But one of the callouts is identifying key personnel that we'll read.
Yeah.
So I think that
I'm
should
agreeing
stay.
with that. That's
yeah,
what I'm
that
saying.
should stay in. But I agree with you that any additional firm qualification information is not necessary at this point.
Unless it's different, I wouldn't preclude it, but I'm just saying, what do we need more firm qualifications for unless it's going to be different?
Yep.
And that's a lot of work. We just heard from Eric. It's a lot of work.
Okay, so references, limiting a maximum number of pages. Again, I'll remove that.
The maximum pages thing, I would dispense with that.
Yes.
Yeah, all of them.
The scope of work, there were some different ideas associated with that scope of work. And the scope of work is going to identify the different stages or phases of the master plan, and it helps the firm identify what we want to accomplish in each of those stages, and of course for them to identify how much time and the cost associated with each of those stages. So Ms. Beakey had some comments that were structuring the stages or the phases differently than what we had identified in the original document that we sent to you. So I'll refer to her statement of administrative management and startup phase, cooperation with one or more means planning commission and/or established task force. This phase will identify key issues and community priorities. The key issues and the community priorities should be developed not at this stage, in staff's opinion. They should be developed and unquestionably after the data and analysis and the community input. You don't establish, the Planning Commission can certainly convey what you believe are key issues or community priorities, but it's very important to do the data and analysis and the public input stage, in my opinion, before we establish those.
Okay, I have a question just as background, because I've never been through this before, but just as in other businesses and other professions, there are distinct phases that everybody does. I don't know if that's true in this business. In other words, if you were an architect, which I'm not, but my scope of work would be programming, schematic, design development, construction administration, bidding, the construction documents, bidding, construction administration. That's how everybody does it. Does everybody do the same thing in master planning or not?
No, there are some specific requirements under the State Act that the Planning Commission must identify and address in the Planning Commission. We'll call those the minimums. But if the Planning Commission sees that you want to go above and beyond that with particular objectives or goals or topics, by all means you have the ability to do so.
I'm more thinking along the lines as if there is room for creativity between the firms, that we should let them tell us how they want to do it.
The staff completely agrees with that statement.
All right, any other comments there? All right, what's next?
There was some reference to establishing a task force. We'll remind the Planning Commission that under the State Enabling Act, it's the Planning Commission that adopts the master plan. And while it's important to hold a variety of public input sessions and invite a wide variety of constituents, staff would strongly recommend not creating a task force. We would like to keep it more close-knit with the Planning Commission taking the lead. And of course, the City Commission, under the State Act, does have the ability to approve or reject the master plan. And we asked the City Commission to establish that in August, and the City Commission agreed that at the end of the process, based on the master plan that the Planning Commission comes up with, that the City Commission would ultimately approve or reject it. And of course, we have a strong representation from the City Commission on the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chair? The Planning Commission has a pretty full agenda as it is. We're the Planning Commission, we're the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, we're the Sign Ordinance Committee. The process of overseeing a master plan, the volunteers who oversee a master plan is onerous. How much more are you going to add to the plate of the Planning Commission by having us manage this process, as opposed to, say, appointing a representative? We have a specific skill set here, and certainly we will vote on or would be expected to approve certain steps in the process, but I'm inclined to think that we should have some sort of volunteer task force spending their time guiding the process. And I know that the last time we did a master plan, we had a task force and it didn't turn out well, but that doesn't mean it won't work, because it's used effectively in many other communities.
Okay, I was looking at that. I was a little bit confused, because is the task force, and the way Ms. Beakey sort of left it, if there's a task force, is it the department's position that we ought to tell the proposers we're not doing a task force, or is it just, what is your position?
I think it's relevant to establish that at this point in time. Yes.
Okay. You want to make that part of the thing you're going to deal with?
Procedurally, to me, this body, as the Planning Commission, is responsible for the land use and the master plan. So from that standpoint, I think all of you need to understand what went into it, how it got accomplished, and know all the background and input to it. I honestly think that through the public engagement process, and that can be set up totally by the consultant and staff, others will have an opportunity to have input in that, and you can participate in those engagement processes how you see fit. Whether you show up at every one of them, or whether you show up at one because it's in your area of the city where you live, I think that's fine. I think putting a task force together brings in points of view that can drive that engagement differently, and then you're not going to be involved in it. I think there's going to be opportunities for the presenters to show up here and say, here's what we're recommending and why, and you can keep the process moving. I'm not sure what a task force brings to the concept in the sense of that, because we're going to do a lot of public engagement. Part of this idea was to do public engagement in each quadrant of the city, because each quadrant may be different in their points of view, and part of setting this up would be how many quadrants do we have. Minimally, I would think, if we were talking about 4.
It's
quad.
Exactly how many?
Well, but but
so you do know
it
math.
could be 6. It could be. Breaking the city up was my point. Sectors, better term. But I think that would be how we would define it, and those groups would have that input. The consultant would then go back and put together and make a thing. My big concern with the task force is you're going to be out of this process, and when it gets in front of you, it's not quite as you don't have the knowledge base that I think you should have as the Planning Commission moving that forward.
If I may respond,
Commissioner Douglas.
and yet we had a task force for the Normandy Oaks Park, and we had a task force for the downtown park, and those were just park plans where we felt it was useful and necessary to have an additional body. So for something like as important as a master plan, why wouldn't we use a task force approach, incorporating members of the Planning Commission? Rhetorical question.
Okay, and I think we had
I was just trying to provide an alternative. I know that this is generally a lot of discussion, but the prior master plans that my previous communities, and of course in another state, have been involved with, didn't really appoint a task force or have planning commission involvement to the extent of what you're talking about. Typically the consultant, and I don't know if that's part of our master plan process, but the consultant, and I know it will cost more, but they would actually update the Planning Commission regular work session updates at your meetings at each stage of the process so that you're understanding what they did and providing that feedback throughout the process. It does extend the time in which to complete a master plan, but I do recognize that your time is valuable and you have other commitments, and this is a very extensive long-term process. That is another way to approach it if you want to just receive those updates as to periodically as to where the consultant is at each stage of the process.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at in the sense of the Planning Commission would get those updates. The engagement would occur out in the community, and they would lead that engagement. And the Planning Commission, the entire body could show up at those, they could not show up at those.
And ours did as well. It's just that not everyone can attend the meetings, but the engagement as far as the Planning Commission and the consultant as this stage would occur in this location in periodic updates to this commission.
And the consultant should be the one that's taking all of that and putting it into an analysis and a document to recommend to this body based on that discussion. I think a task force at the park or a park was driving the design, which is fine, but that's not where I would suggest this go, where a task force drive the master plan. That really should come out of the community engagement and the expert to put together a plan to address what's coming out of that engagement, not a task force that's going to drive the narrative.
So I tend to agree with that, and that was kind of my thought process as well, was that I'm not sure the task force is the right solution here. In light of essentially how we are structuring the consultant to do their work and do their job. My expectation was that as the Planning Commission are sort of responsible for that process of what the consultant is doing, it's still sort of a staff-driven and community engagement-driven actions that come out of that. How that's progressing, I would fully expect that consultant periodically comes to us and reports back to us how the work is progressing, which would give us the opportunity then to, essentially say yay or nay to the strategy that's being employed. I agree with Shar. If we had to, be engaged on every detail of what was happening with the consultant's work, it would be a lot for this body to do and for us as individuals to do. That's not how I see this process actually unfolding, based on how we've set it up so far. So I don't know that a task force is the right solution either. Knowing that we'd be able to get input still.
Absolutely. I maybe to kind of reframe what I think I'm hearing and how I've experienced it, and on the side of being the professional as well as on the side of being part of the community, is I've generally said this board would be the owner / client to the professional consultant, and staff in this instance would almost act as like the owner's rep, where they're dealing with the day-to-day interaction, administration, management with the client or with the consultant, and then at big milestones or at our monthly meetings is when, hey, this is what we've been working on through our public engagement, through our this, through our that. So we're updated at big points so we can weigh in and respond to that, versus, like you said, if it was the day-to-day and we had to answer 13 emails no way. That's a volunteer position. I can't make this a full-time job.
All right. Mr. Murphy, I think you can proceed.
Yes. There's some comments with regard to the particular phase of inventory and data analysis. I don't see any objectionable items with those. That's in line with what staff had developed. Probably the most critical one, and one that Planning Commission members have been most vocal about, is the public engagement phase. And Ms. Beakey had added some comments with regard to holding sessions with specific affinity groups, women, youth, business owners, transit riders, etc., to allow, if the input is for specialized purpose, there's the opportunity for others to give input on the same topic through this means. And I would suggest that we not have specific groups that we target. Those in the past have always had, when you invite people with one vantage point, you often discourage people with an opposing or different, in some way, shape, or form, vantage point to come out and provide you their comments. They tend to be very specifically vantage point driven results if you are specifically soliciting a group of individuals. So I would hesitate on targeting specific groups. Again, business owners, transit riders, what have you. They end up typically with a one-sided, lopsided viewpoint.
Mr. Mayor.
And I'll just add, nothing stops those groups from coming to public comment, and, because then you find yourself in the position that, well, you're only listening to these groups, not these groups. And I just think to manage that, it's just a whole full-time job in itself.
Yes.
We're in government. We just, barely make 51% of the people happy at any given time. So, I don't know how you go about it. I appreciate the effort, the thought, but in an ideal world, but I don't see it working in this case.
The list of groups could be endless. Those that you didn't think of may come to the podium and ask you to have a special meeting for them.
Yep.
In this day and age, it's endless.
I think we hear that with every decision that we have at this table or at the commission table that has any controversy.
All right.
So,
Mr.
I've got
Contina.
a little bit of a different opinion on this. Not that it's going to stop the show or anything, but one is that the language, the way it's written, doesn't necessarily require that we meet with these special affinity groups. It's simply stating that if it's deemed important enough that we're specifically saying that it's okay to do that, is the way the language is written, at least the way that I read it. My concern or the discussion point is I think there's lots of groups out there that normally are not able to give input for various reasons. They just simply, the information doesn't get to them. They don't have computers. They don't have cell phones, whatever it may be. And so I guess I'm a little bit concerned that we run the risk of having people that should be included not be included, or have their voice not be included, because they typically get marginalized. I don't necessarily take too much issue with the language, only because it's not stating specifically that we do have to do that, but it's allowing for that if we deem it appropriate. And because we know that there's always marginalized groups of the community, I would hate to, I guess, take it out of there knowing that there's the potential that could happen again.
Well, so I would...
Okay. Mr. Coaster, go ahead.
I would tend to agree with the sentiment. I think the language of the RFP needs to be careful not to cite specific groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So any specificity that we try and put in there is, it limits the potential outreach. It limits. We're predisposing who might be an underrepresented group.
Yeah.
I think as a general, broader term, we can request that the consultants give us their strategy for including underrepresented groups in these panels, in these participations. Because yes, a lot of times these are done during business hours when 85% of the population is at work and there's no possible way they can make it, or they don't have childcare or whatever. There's some sort of circumstance that makes it difficult for them to participate. So as part of their public engagement strategy, we want them to tell us how they are going to engage typically marginalized or underrepresented groups in these sort of public engagement sessions.
And it may not be through in-person meetings.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe in a totally different fashion.
Yeah, I think I agree with Mr. Klooster. I don't want to give the answers to the test, right? Because they'll answer to that. And honestly, if we're going to evaluate 5 or 6 of these, like 5, then I'd like to see what their engagement plan is. And if it comes up short on all of them, then I think we play the audible and say, hey, all of your proposals, or there's some here that need to be tweaked. And when we negotiate in those final rounds, we say, hey, make sure you include this. I would hate to have them write something that, you know, meets an answer versus coming up with stuff we don't even know. And, you know, I'd love, and maybe that's a way to evaluate. If community engagement is so important to us, if somebody comes up really short on that community engagement area, that's going to be a valuation factor for me. And I don't want to give them the answer.
Yeah.
Commissioner Douglas.
And the existing language says that defines the groups to be listened to as community stakeholders. I could make an argument that, you know, community stakeholders may be those affinity groups, and I'm particularly thinking of the business community because it's one thing for citizens to talk about the business services that they need, but we are also a regional business center, and what businesses need to succeed affects our success also.
But I do like Mr. Klooster's response and suggestion. I think that satisfies the concern, but in a way that doesn't narrow the scope already for the consultant and really forces them to provide us with that strategy.
All right.
And if they're listening now, they'll know.
That's right. And if they're, yeah, they might be. So, all right. Very good. Mr. Murphy?
In the plan preparation phase, we identify that the selected firm, based on the public engagement and based on the data analysis, that's the phase in which they start to identify the different land use decisions and how they impact existing or emerging issues, and when we list some of those issues. So I don't have any objection to the proposed language modifications because, again, those are what we refer to as existing or emerging issues, not limited to. And we list a variety of things. And she added some language, no problem. There was reference to the number of meetings that we expect at different stages. This particular one, no less than 2 in-person presentations to the Planning Commission. Again, it references the task force, so we'll remove that particular language.
Well, let me ask a question from what I just heard then. If we're not going to have a task force and we're going to expect that the Planning Commission is going to get presentations from the consultant, do we want to put a number in there for that? Does that tell them that, well, only, you know, it might be 2? That seems like not enough.
Well, I would think you'd get updates at each phase, at least. So if the inventory data that tell you what they found would get you a meeting there. Plan preparation, we said at least 2 because that's a little more involved.
Well, then, so I mean, I'm not trying to wordsmith this too much, but isn't it we're looking for an update to the Planning Commission at appropriate stages, at appropriate intervals? That's what we're looking for.
So this is specifically under the
plan preparation.
So we're asking for at least 2 during that phase. You know, the way it reads, I'm of the understanding that we're getting updates at the end of each phase, and sometimes more often, at a minimum.
And it helps the firm identify how much time and cost associated with their proposal. So we do need to identify at least a minimum number so that they can put a dollar amount to that, and a time frame associated with that as well.
All right, I understand the logic there, although I don't. That's fine. Proceed.
And then the final adoption phase, 1 in-person meeting to the Planning Commission, and any type of in-person or virtual meetings with city staff to keep the project moving forward. And then the different deliverables that they need to provide at the stages. We failed to mention at the beginning that we want them to have a designated website and social media platforms to be able to distribute notice of the progress that we're making, and meetings, upcoming meetings, draft versions of the plan, so that the public has the opportunity to keep informed of the process as we move forward. So that's always an expectation in each phase, is that they update the designated website and they release items on social media platforms, and that we gather all of the original files from them so that we can maintain that at the end of the process. Ms. Beakey did have some comments with regard to the evaluation and selection. She had referenced an interest in having a point-based system in evaluating the proposals, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. Oftentimes when I hear of point-based systems, I fear that firms are responding purely based on trying to score the highest in a point system, and not being as creative and unique as possible in demonstrating to us what they can provide at what cost. And if we believe that that is a good value based on the quality of what we believe they can provide to us for that particular price, versus going with the cheapest one or the highest score, I really hesitate towards identifying a point-based system, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Mr. Mayor.
I agree with those sentiments 100%.
That's my thought. Mr. Gantino.
I struggle with these as well, because if it doesn't come with a very strict criteria scale as to how you apply the points that we all agree to, it's just too difficult for the point system to still be objective. So I tend to struggle with the point system as well.
And some of what Mr. Casada had referenced of, in certain business worlds, there are exact things that you're looking for, and we're not having that strict. That we're providing them with different phases and what we want to achieve at each of those phases, but we're leaving it up to them to identify their uniqueness and approach, and of course based on their price scale as well, as to what they can accomplish for us and whether we believe that that's a good value based on their qualifications.
Right. I would just say it the same way. It's not a commodity. You're really looking for a long-term partner in this. And yeah, we'll be able to gauge some of the stuff, have a rubric, but to Mr. Murphy's point, if you say you want these things and you're putting a point value to it, then what's the point of having the RFPs? Just, you know what I mean? Like, you want these new ideas to come in, and it's not like we're doing a roadway and we're saying, okay, what's the price? What's the timing? What's the warranty period? You know what I mean? That's a very exact science and commodity. This is much more, we want that openness, and we may go with the lowest price or we go with the highest price. You know, it all depends on what we get. And I think trying to prescribe those numbers and points to a value formula, I think is risking the entire desire to get these open opinions in.
I'll circle back to the reference of the public engagement phase. And if we have 5 firms bidding and one firm has an exceptional way of going about public engagement that the other firms and we didn't think of, and it's going to cost us more money, but we think it's worth it, then this would be tying our hands, in my opinion, to say, well, that's better and we want to pay more for that, and we'll do that.
Yeah, I'll echo pretty much everyone's sentiments that I appreciate the goal of objectivity. Unfortunately, in situations like this, it tends to kneecap us, where like we end up not picking the unanimous favorite that is the most creative because the point system didn't land that way. Yep. And I, unfortunately, have seen that happen in many instances where the unanimous favorite ended up finishing second because they were like 3 points behind someone else, and because it was a pre-approved point system, they're like everyone's hands were tied. So I would be very cautious at considering a point system, and I would suggest against it because it makes it more difficult for us to latch on to creative solutions, and we'll unfortunately end up with a lot of by-the-book stuff, which I don't think best serves our community.
All right. I'll just make a quick comment. The advantage of a point system or some sort of system like this is a structure that everybody is forced to look at. I don't think there's a rule against having our own. I mean, I'm going to stop myself. I agree with what's said. To come up with a point system that we're going to try to apply objectively, there's a lot more work that has to go into that. And it's very difficult to get everybody on the same page and analyzing it the same way. However, there can be a structure to analysis that maybe the department or this committee within itself says, okay, what does everybody think about this, and that? In other words, we can structure the analysis, and we probably should structure the analysis to some extent, so we all look at what we're trying to put a value on. I also don't think there's any rule that has to go in the RFP. I think we can develop our own rubric on our own amongst ourselves. I don't think there's any rule against that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think too, could be a whole lot of debate. Just how do you put the points? What do you determine in there? I mean, that'll take a month. Companies that have been in business for 30 years try to do this on things, and they still don't have it right. But I do think, though, for our own individual, if we agree what the basic components are that we want to talk about as a team, we can rank and say, like in mine, I'll say, okay, these guys were the top performers in this area. Cost, pretty transparent. You know what I mean? And then we make our own determination as commissioners, like the priority of all of those things. If I'm a real big community engagement guy, then maybe I'm going to value that more than somebody that's a real, budget stickler, that isn't looking, buys their steaks from the dollar store, True thing. They have ribeyes at the dollar store. It's totally
I'm on my way.
Surprised about that.
Probably you can call those.
You can buy it. Wouldn't recommend it. But so you know what I mean. We can do that up here in the major buckets, and then eventually, what typically happens in these processes, at least when I've been involved in it over decades, like there's always a couple firms that rise to the top. That's just in every case. We know it, and then from there you manage it and go from there.
We're not going to be able to get away from our individual personalities and our individual agendas. Like, we all have things that are important to us individually, and we'll respond differently to the proposals that way. I hesitate to suggest that this body tries to come to some organized structure as to how we're going to evaluate these, because I think a lot of it will flush out in the conversation of what the consultants said in their proposal, what they said in their presentations. Coming from the point of view of a professional consultant and firm that we make our bread and butter on breaking the rules and listening to the RFP and then telling them everything that they didn't know they wanted. That's how we win most of our commissions, is because we ignore 90% of what they had in the RFP and tell them what they actually want. So I would hesitate to try and set something up ahead of time, because I would hope that, and I would assume based on the RFPs that we're getting, that we're going to get stuff that there's no way that we could have assumed we wanted ahead of time, and that's the best case scenario.
That's why we're doing it.
Good, well put.
All right, very good.
Good.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So you guys all said a lot of great things. I don't think we need to publish the evaluation criteria that we're going to use in the RFP. But however, I do think that we do need to have at least some sort of loosely organized evaluation system that we can all agree to. And the only reason I'm saying that is I want us to be able to, at the end of the day, if we are challenged on the decision that's ultimately made, we've got some data that we can fall back on to show that there was some thought, some organization to how we evaluated these firms. It wasn't simply how we felt, each of us individuals felt when we woke up that morning, or who had the prettiest cover page, whatever it may be. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is the recent lawsuits that the city was hit with is sort of right around that idea, claiming that the method in which the evaluations occurred was suspect. I guess stated that way. And not that I think this is going to have that same issue, but at the same time, I do want to know that in the back of my head that if we were asked how we came to the decision, we'd have some sort of somewhat logical, organized way of saying this is how we evaluate it, in addition to our own sort of gut reactions and things like that.
All right, Commissioner Douglas.
So perhaps it would be a series of questions, 10 questions, where we would rate them on a scale of like 1 to 10. Meaning, to what extent did this applicant demonstrate an understanding of the nature of the city of Royal Oak? To what extent is their pricing consistent with industry standards? So we might, subsequent to this meeting, develop those standards, and even though those scores will not determine who we pick, it will help guide our discussion.
I'll just add that during the city manager and I believe city attorney process, what we did is we were just given like a little book as individual commissioners, just like some guiding things like questions or whatever, and like we would kind of just for our own personal guidance to look at it. Maybe that's an approach we do. We don't try to argue the debates of whether this individual is number 1 or number 2 in this area, but we can evaluate on 1 to 5, 1 to 10 personally with the basic buckets of criteria that staff could put to bed. We don't weight them, we don't do anything. We just say, hey, we're looking at community engagement, we're looking at costs, we're looking at these things. And as they go through their presentation, we each have a little cheat sheet, and then keep them in the event that anyone comes back. We can say, well, this is how I came to mind. Because remember, it's not, each of us individually isn't, it's the body that makes the decision. Sure. So all of those things, if somebody goes off the, outside the boundaries and starts doing crazy stuff, that's okay. It's the rest of us that, have to be grounded, because the body makes the decision. So that's what I would think. That would actually be helpful for me. It's just a little worksheet, but I don't think we add any weights or, just what are the things that are going to be the core elements that we've already determined.
So those questions would be part of what staff provides you as a cover memo to all the responses versus actual language that goes into the RFP.
Yeah,
that's what I would be thinking. Is that
we can do
not,
that.
You're not putting that in the RFP. It's for us, and for me, just to follow up. Some of you people have experience in this. I do not in dealing with master plan RFPs, so I'm going to appreciate that maybe staff or this, there's a, hey, you're going to want to look at this, 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 and this.
Yes, we can achieve that.
Okay. All right, very good. I think is that the end of it?
That is the end of it, other than the language of the finance department, all the boring stuff the finance department needs to put in there.
All right. Any other comments about the master plan RFP draft by the commissioners, or any other questions for Mr. Murphy? All right. Any action on that needed? No, it was just a discussion. All right, next. Elections of officers. Well, last time we adjourned this because there were only 5 of us, and guess what? There's only 5 of us. So I don't know, what is the sense of the commission here? Do we want to wait until we have all 7 of us? Comments?
I will make a comment in that I do know the wishes of a member that's not represented here, so we kind of have more than 5 minds represented.
You only got 1 vote.
You diluted your vote.
Okay, but I'm not sure what that means. Are you in favor of proceeding with 5 of us, or are you in favor of waiting until we have the full body? That's the question that I'm asking.
I would actually personally be in favor of waiting, because I think everyone should have their own say.
Any other comments? That's what we did last time.
In agreement with that.
Yeah, because if you guys were against it, it'd be like, I'm on board, let's pull up the ladder sort of thing, because you're here. Anyways, okay. So we'll
adjourn to next meeting.
We'll table it till next meeting.
Do we need a motion to that effect?
Yeah, if you want to clean it up.
I move we postpone election of officers to our next meeting.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Douglas to postpone the election of officers to the next meeting, second by Mr. Klusser. I don't think there's any further discussion. This I'll call for the voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, table till next meeting. All right, non-action items. We have another Michigan Planner article. Sometimes we get comments about what's in these. Does anybody have comments or follow up on that?
No, just thank staff for sharing it.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. And I guess that would be it. Now, since we're doing this new voice voting thing, I guess, is there a motion to adjourn? Or is there, I would ask this, strike that. Is there any more business that the commission would like to engage in, or are there any statements that the commission would like to make before we adjourn? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Support.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.